The first green thing Maribel saw at Bellwether Vineyard was growing beside her grandfather's grave. At first she thought it was a weed. She had been kneeling in the ash to wipe soot from Amos's marker with the sleeve of her black dress, which was no improvement to either the marker or the dress. The stone sat on the western rise where he could face the rose, or where the rose had been. Below her, 47 acres of burned vines leaned against melted wire, black and twisted as handwriting no one could read. Then the color caught her eye. A shoot no longer than her little finger had pushed through the gray crust near the base of an old vine. Its two leaves were still folded, glossy and indecently green. Mara touched the dirt beside it, not the shoot. She knew better than that. In her truck, tucked inside the glove compartment, was Celeste's offer to buy the ruined acreage for less than Mara owed on her hospital bills. In the ground before her was Amos Bell, who had left her every scorched inch of it. "You could have just said you were still mad," Mara whispered. Wind moved over the hill, carrying the smell that rain had not managed to wash away. The chute trembled beside his marker. 3 days earlier, the family had buried Amos under a clean blue sky. The weather offended Mara. She had wanted clouds at least, something heavy and low enough to acknowledge that the man had spent 81 years arguing with this particular piece of earth and was now being lowered into it. Instead, sunlight flashed against the folding chairs. The minister squinted through his prayer, and 2 hawks circled over the burned vineyard as if waiting for everyone to leave. The funeral was held on the intact lawn behind the farmhouse because Celeste said the church would feel impersonal. Celeste had also ordered 60 white chairs, catered sandwiches, and a framed photograph of Amos from 20 years earlier, before age softened his face and took most of his hair. In the picture, he held a glass of Cabernet up to the light, as though personally inspecting the blood of Christ. He hated that photograph, Mara said. Grant, standing beside her, glanced at the easel. He hated all photographs. He said that one made him look constipated. Grant's mouth twitched before he caught himself. He was 34 and built like the former college rower he mentioned whenever anyone accused him of avoiding physical work. His suit fit beautifully. His shoes were already dusty. "Maybe don't tell Aunt Bev that," he said. She brought the frame. "Then definitely don't tell her he called her Bavo." This time Grant let out one small laugh. It surprised both of them. Celeste turned from across the lawn. She did not glare. Celeste Bell had perfected a look far more effective than glaring, a calm tightening around the eyes that made other people feel they had brought grocery store wine to a serious dinner. Grant straightened. Mara looked back at the casket. She had come directly from a night shift at North Valley Medical. Her black dress had spent 4 years at the back of her closet and now pinched under the arms. There was a pale line across one shoe where she had tried to cover a scuff with permanent marker. Her lunch bag sat behind the driver's seat of Amos's pickup, with half a turkey sandwich and 2 leaking ice packs inside. She could feel Celeste noticing all of it. The minister invited anyone who wished to share a memory. Aunt Bev spoke about Amos teaching her to drive a tractor. One of the former tasting room managers described the time he opened a rare bottle for a couple celebrating their 50th anniversary, then charged them $12 because free wine makes people suspicious. Luis Mendoza stood near the last row of chairs with his hat in his hands, but he did not speak. Mara kept waiting for Celeste to look at her. She didn't. So Mara listened as people described a man who loved old jazz, hated seedless grapes, and could predict rain from the ache in his left knee. All of it was true. None of it was the truth she carried. Amos asleep in his recliner, with a bowl of soup untouched beside him. Amos pretending not to need help, buttoning his cuff. Amos, after the fire, sitting in Mara's truck and staring through the windshield while sparks climbed behind them. "Don't turn around," she had told him. He had turned around. At the grave, Celeste placed a red rose on the casket. Her younger son, Colin, followed with another. Grant dropped a folded handkerchief, which was either accidental or the most honest offering anyone made. Mara had nothing in her hands. She pressed 2 fingers to the wooden lid before it descended. The night before Amos died, he had awakened at 2 in the morning and asked her whether the north pump was running. "There is no north pump anymore," she had said. His eyes remained closed. That wasn't the question. She told him yes. It was the last lie she ever gave him. After the service, people moved toward the farmhouse, where tables had been arranged beneath the sycamores. The house had survived because the fire crew held the line at the gravel drive. Its white siding looked almost rude against the black hills. Mara waited until most of the guests had gone ahead. She wanted one quiet minute by the grave, but Celeste appeared at her elbow, carrying 2 empty water bottles and a paper program. "You should eat," she said. "I will. There's turkey, roast beef, and something they insist is grilled vegetable." "That sounds threatening." Celeste almost smiled. For one second she looked like the aunt who used to paint Mara's toenails at the kitchen table, blowing on each one as if cooling soup. Then her gaze dropped to Mara's shoes. "You came from work?" "I changed in the parking lot." "You could have taken the night off." "I did take the night off. Last night." Celeste crushed one of the bottles slightly, then stopped and smoothed the label with her thumb. "I'm not criticizing you. You're talented enough to do it by accident." "Mara." There it was. Not anger exactly. Exhaustion with a familiar shape. Celeste looked toward the grave. "I was his daughter for 58 years. You weren't the only person who lost him." "I know. Do you?" Mara watched Grant catch Colin by the elbow before he backed into the photograph of Amos. Colin was talking with his hands, a drink already balanced in one of them. "I didn't say I was. You don't have to say things. You walk around looking as if everyone failed a test you never told us we were taking." The remark landed because Amos had once said almost the same thing about Celeste. Mara took the flattened bottle from her and added it to the other. "I'll recycle these." Celeste exhaled through her nose. "The estate meeting is Tuesday at 10. Peter wants everyone present. I work Tuesday, then switch." The easy command scraped against something raw. Celeste must have seen it happen because her voice softened. "There are practical matters. We need to get through them without making everything harder than it already is." Mara looked past her to the burned rose. The vineyard still gave off a bitter smell when the ground warmed, a mixture of wet charcoal, spoiled fruit, and melted plastic. Amos had called it Bellwether, even though the original family name was Bell, and there had never been a weather vane on the property. He liked the extra syllable, said it gave the grapes confidence. "What could possibly be hard now?" Mara asked. On Tuesday morning, the family gathered in the dining room beneath a chandelier Amos had always claimed was too fancy for people who ate beans from the pot. Peter Shaw, the family attorney, arranged his papers at one end of the table. He had known Amos for 40 years and wore the cautious expression of a man approaching a dog that had bitten him before. Mara arrived 6 minutes late with damp hair and a paper cup of gas station coffee. The pickup had stalled twice on the county road. No one asked. Celeste sat nearest Peter with a yellow legal pad in front of her. Grant and Colin occupied opposite sides of the table, both pretending not to care who had been given the better seat. "You made it," Celeste said. "Hospital released me for good behavior." Colin looked at her coffee. "That stuff'll put you back in. Then I'll get the employee discount." Peter cleared his throat before the room could become almost friendly. The estate was less grand than family gossip had made it. There were accounts, but the fire in Amos's final year of medical care had eaten deeply into them. Celeste received the farmhouse and its immediate grounds, along with the remaining cash after expenses. The lake cabin went jointly to Grant and Colin, which made both men sit straighter for different reasons. Grant received Amos's restored 1956 tractor and the flatbed. Colin got the old bottling equipment, several antiques, and the Jeep. "The pickup?" Mara asked. Peter checked the page, included among the vehicles passing to Grant. Grant turned toward her. "I thought it was part of the farm. It was Grandpa's." "Yes, which is why I thought, let him finish," Celeste said. Peter removed his glasses, cleaned them, and put them back on without improving anyone's view of what came next. To Mara Bell, Amos leaves the vineyard acreage in Parcel 7, consisting of approximately 47 acres, together with all vines, trellising, irrigation infrastructure, and permanent improvements situated within those boundaries. Silence held for a beat. Then Colin said, "The burned part?" Celeste's pen stopped. Peter continued reading, but Mara heard only pieces. Taxes due, transfer, existing condition, no warranty, a phrase so absurd she nearly laughed. She looked through the dining room windows. Beyond the lawn, black rows descended toward the road. The pump house was a concrete shell. The storage barn had collapsed inward. Somewhere below the rise lay miles of irrigation, tubing melted into the soil. Amos had left Celeste the house. He had left Grant the machines. He had left Colin anything that might be sold without a shovel, and to Mara, who could not afford to replace the brake pads on the truck she apparently no longer owned, he had left the part the fire had finished. Colin leaned back, chair creaking. "No offense, Mayor, but that's rough." Grant shot him a look. "What?" "It is." Peter slid a separate sheet toward Mara. "The parcel includes the family burial plot on the western rise, in accordance with your grandfather's recorded request." Of course it did. Even dead, Amos had found a way to make leaving complicated. Celeste reached across and covered Mara's hand. Her palm was cool and dry. "You don't have to decide anything today," she said. Mara looked at her aunt's fingers resting over hers. The gesture was gentle. The relief behind it was not. "Decide what? What to do with it?" "It sounds like Grandpa decided." Celeste withdrew her hand. "Land carries expenses, Mara. So do chandeliers." Grant looked down quickly. Celeste's jaw tightened. "I'm trying to help." Peter began explaining the transfer process, but the family's attention had already fractured into possession. Colin wanted to know whether the bottling equipment could be moved before the estate closed. Grant asked for the tractor keys. Celeste made a note about changing the farmhouse insurance. Their questions overlapped until Amos's life sounded like a yard sale with better vocabulary. Mara stood. "Where are you going?" Celeste asked. "To work. We aren't finished. I think Grandpa is." Outside, the pickup started on the third attempt. Grant came down the steps before she could pull away. He knocked on the window, and she lowered it by hand. "I'm not taking the truck," he said. "You already did. You know what I mean." She waited. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Use it for now, until you figure things out." The words were meant kindly. For now, still lodged under her ribs. Mara nodded once and drove away. Celeste's purchase offer arrived the following morning. It was not insulting if measured against what burned agricultural land could cost someone with no capital. That was how Celeste explained it over the phone. The hospitality group interested in the surrounding property might eventually restore portions of the vineyard, or they might build cottages, or they might preserve the ridge. Nothing was settled. Celeste was offering Mara a clean exit before taxes and cleanup swallowed her. "A clean exit from what?" Mara asked. There was a pause. "From a burden you never asked for." Mara stared at the hospital vending machine, while a packet of crackers hung from its metal coil, refusing to fall. "He asked me to take it. He left it to you. That isn't always the same thing." The crackers dropped without warning. That afternoon, still wearing her black dress from a memorial visit she had not intended to make, Mara drove to Bellwether and parked below the western rise. She walked past dead vines that stained her fingers when she touched them. At Amos's marker, she wiped the soot from his name and told him exactly what she thought of his judgment, his timing, and his habit of mistaking hardship for character building. Then she saw the green shoot. Now, kneeling beside it, Mara followed the charred trunk down to the soil. She scraped gently with one fingernail until black bark gave way to a thin line of damp green beneath. Alive. Not healthy, not safe, not enough. Alive. Mara sat back on her heels. Far below, the vineyard spread toward the road, ruin beyond anything one small shoot could answer for. One season, she told Amos, the wind moved the folded leaves. One. And if this kills me, I'm haunting you somewhere with no grapes. She took Celeste's offer from the glove compartment, folded it twice, and tucked it beneath the loose stone at the base of the marker. Then she went looking for water. The nearest working spigot was attached to the farmhouse. Mara found an empty gallon jug behind the pickup seat, rinsed out the stale coffee smell, and carried it across the lawn. She was halfway to the faucet when Celeste opened the back door. Her aunt had changed out of funeral black. She wore jeans, loafers, and one of Amos's old work shirts with the sleeves rolled precisely to her elbows. The shirt unsettled Mara more than the purchase offer had. "What are you doing?" "Stealing water." "I can see that. That saves time." Celeste stepped onto the porch. "You could have knocked." "I didn't know I needed an appointment with the hose." "You don't. I'm asking why you're here in your funeral dress, filling a jug from my house." Mara set the jug beneath the faucet. The pipe knocked when she turned the handle. Brown water coughed out first, then ran clear. "There's something alive near Grandpa's grave." Celeste looked toward the western rise, shading her eyes. "A snake? A vine?" After a moment, Celeste came down the steps. "Mara, there are weeds all over the place." "I checked the bark. You checked one plant, one vine." Fine. 1 vine. Mara shut off the water. The jug had filled only 3/4 of the way because the plastic had collapsed inward during some previous life. Celeste watched her screw on the cap. Did you read my offer? I did. It's fair. I didn't say it wasn't. That usually means you're about to say something worse. Mara lifted the jug. Water sloshed over her wrist through the crooked cap. I'm going to keep the land through the season. The change in Celeste's face was small. Her shoulders lowered before they stiffened again. A season, she repeated, to see what's still alive. Almost none of it. Almost isn't none. The county inspected after the fire, for structures, not roots. Celeste folded her arms, pulling Amos's shirt tight across her back. Do you know what the property taxes are? Yes. Do you know what removal of the burned trellising will cost? No. What about insurance, irrigation, soil remediation? No, and not yet. Then what exactly do you know? That I said 1 season. Celeste walked to the edge of the lawn. Ash had drifted into the grass in soft gray patches, and she avoided them without looking down. There's a group interested in the full site, she said. The house, the vineyard, possibly the ridge. They aren't going to wait while you conduct an experiment. They can buy your part. They don't want a farmhouse with a burned field attached. My field isn't attached. Peter called it Parcel 7. Mara. There were several versions of her name in Celeste's mouth. This one meant, stop making me say the ugly thing. Mara waited anyway. Celeste glanced back at the house. Your grandfather made choices based on emotion during a terrible year. We don't have to keep making them after him. The water jug grew heavier against Mara's hip. You think leaving it to me was a mistake. I think leaving you an expense was not the kindness he imagined. He didn't confuse hard things with unkind things. He did it constantly. That answer came too fast to be strategic. For a moment, neither woman moved. Mara remembered Celeste at 29, laughing with her shoes off during a harvest dinner. She remembered Amos criticizing the way she held pruning shears until she threw them into the dirt and walked home. Love at Bellwether had always come with instruction. Celeste rubbed her forehead. Take a week. Talk to someone who knows land values. Don't turn this into a test of whether you loved him. I'm not. You have his exact look on your face. What look? The one that cost everyone around him a great deal of time. Mara carried the water back up the rise. She dug a shallow basin around the green chute with her fingers and poured slowly, stopping whenever water began to run off the baked soil. When the jug was empty, the darkened earth formed a small circle among the ash. It looked ridiculous. So did a pulse on a hospital monitor, if you ignored the body around it. Mara took out her phone and photographed the vine from 3 angles. She photographed the trunk, the graft union, the soil, and the rows surrounding it. Then she called the county agricultural office and spent 43 minutes being transferred among people who were kind, busy, and careful not to tell her anything useful without seeing the property. By the time she reached the hospital for her shift, a charge nurse named Dana was waiting beside the time clock. You're 7 minutes late. Truck. You used Grandpa as an excuse for 2 years. You're going to use his truck now? It's what he would have wanted. Dana looked at Mara's dress beneath her unzipped hoodie. You know we have changing rooms. I enjoy giving the parking lot a sense of danger. Dana's face softened, though her voice did not. You all right? No. Good. I hate obvious liars. Room 12 needs labs. 15 has decided the blood pressure cuff is government surveillance, and somebody put decaf in the regular pot. Mara stopped. That last one is actionable. Work compress the world into tasks with answers. Label the tube. Check the dosage. Bring another blanket. Find the vein. Listen when a frightened man pretended to be angry because anger embarrassed him less. Around midnight, Mara sat at the nurse's station with a legal pad and searched for post-fire vineyard recovery. The photographs online were both encouraging and cruel. Green shoots emerged from scorched trunks. Entire blocks were removed after smoke damage. Growers debated whether heat had killed roots below the surface. Every answer began with "it depends." Dana leaned over Mara's shoulder. Are you buying a winery? I inherited one. Dana took in the photograph of blackened rows. Did it insult the wrong god? Apparently. You inherit the house too? No. Equipment? No. Money? No. Dana picked up the legal pad. Mara had written taxes at the top, then pump, water tanks, soil tests, tools, trailer, wire, posts. The word money appeared 3 times along the margin, circled more aggressively each time. You inherited outside, Dana said. 47 acres of it. That seems excessive. I have a balcony I can't manage. Mara took the pad back. There's one live vine. Oh, then you're set. Thank you. That's the optimism I needed. Dana opened her lunch container. You want my honest opinion? No. Sell it. Mara looked at the photograph again. The shoot was barely visible unless she zoomed in. Beside it, Amos's marker occupied a pale corner of the frame. Yeah, Mara said. That would be honest. When her shift ended, Grant was leaning against the pickup in the staff garage with 2 coffees. He held one out. Mara inspected it. Poison, hazelnut, more expensive poison. You still drink it? She accepted the cup. It was exactly how she took coffee, which irritated her. Grant walked around the truck, examining the mismatched paint and rusted rear bumper. This thing stalled on me at the funeral. It doesn't respond well to criticism. The title transfer came through. Mara stopped drinking. I told you I'm not taking it, he said. You came to my job before sunrise to tell me that? I came because Mom said you're keeping the Vineyard. That was quick. She's upset. She inherited a 4-bedroom house. That isn't what she's upset about. No, she's upset that the burned dirt beside her 4-bedroom house remains slightly beyond her control. Grant studied his coffee lid. He had Amos's hands, broad across the knuckles, though his nails were professionally clean. You think this is funny, he said. Not very. The buyer's interested in developing the property as one site. If you hold the center acreage, there may not be a deal. I don't hold the center. I own the lower rows and the western slope. You know what I mean. Yes, that's why I corrected you. He sighed. What happens after 1 season? I don't know. And if the vines are dead? I don't know. If they're alive? Mara took another drink. The coffee was too sweet. I don't know. Grant nodded as though she had confirmed something. Mom thinks you're punishing her. For what? You tell me. A car alarm chirped across the garage. Mara watched a respiratory therapist load bags into a sedan while talking on the phone. I'm not doing this to Celeste, she said. Mom. To you, she's Mom. To me, she's the person wearing Grandpa's shirt while she tells me he made a mistake. Grant looked away. Mara noticed. She never wears old clothes. He gave it to her. When? I don't know. Before. Before could hold an entire lifetime if nobody pressed it. Grant pulled an envelope from his jacket and handed it to her. Inside was a temporary registration for the pickup and an insurance card with his name above hers. I added you as a driver, he said. You can use it until October, until the season is over. I need a date for the insurer. You could transfer it to me. I could also sell it. It's worth more than you think. So are my kidneys, but I'm using them. I'm trying to help you. The family motto, apparently. Mara gave the envelope back. Keep that somewhere safe. You need it in the truck. It's your truck. Mara, don't be childish. The word struck so cleanly she almost admired it. She held out the coffee. Take this too. Oh, come on. You can't give me permission to rely on something and call that generosity. I drove 40 minutes to make sure you could keep using it. Until October. Yes, until October. Because I'm allowed to need time to decide what to do with something I own. Mara put the coffee on the concrete beside his shoe. Now you understand. She walked toward the bus stop before he could answer. The trip home required 2 buses and a 20-minute walk. By the time Mara reached her apartment, her feet hurt, her phone battery was dead, and the sun had climbed high enough to make sleep feel irresponsible. She lasted 3 hours. At noon she woke, charged her phone, and called Luis Mendoza. He answered on the 6th ring, with machinery roaring behind him. Who is this? Mara Bell. The machinery cut off. For a few seconds she heard only wind. I was told you spoke at the funeral, she said. I did not speak. You were there. That is different. I found a live shoot near the western rise. Then give it water. I did. Good. I need help checking the other vines. No. The answer was calm, almost gentle. Mara sat up in bed. No, they're dead? No, I will not help you check them. Can I ask why? You just did. Can I ask again in a more irritating way? Luis breathed out. It might have been a laugh, but she could not trust the connection. Your grandfather and I did not finish well, he said. I'm beginning to think he specialized in that. He told people my grafting method failed. It did not fail. He wanted the block replanted his way. I'm sorry. You did not do it. Then you can punish him by teaching me everything he was wrong about. This time the sound was definitely a laugh, brief and unwilling. No, Louise said again. Sell the ground, Mara. It is hard enough to grow grapes when the vines are alive. He ended the call. Mara stared at the phone. Then she opened a map, found Mendoza family vineyards 12 miles south of Bellwether, and checked the bus route. There wasn't one. By late afternoon, Grant had left 2 messages. Mara ignored both and ordered a rideshare she could not afford. She carried Amos's pruning knife in her pocket and the photographs on her phone. The driver dropped her at a long gravel road between rows of healthy vines, each one green, straight, and offensive. A hand-painted sign read, Mendoza Family Vineyards. Beneath it, someone had added, No wine tasting without appointment. Mara walked past the sign. Halfway up the road, an older man in a straw hat stepped out from behind a tractor. He watched her approach without surprise. You said no, Mara called. Luis wiped his hands on a red cloth. And yet, here you are. My grandfather said that was my worst quality. No? Luis looked at her for a long moment. He said it was your best one. He turned the tractor back on before she could ask when. The tractor moved 20 feet before Luis stopped it again. He climbed down, walked to a vine, and began clipping leaves into a white bucket. Mara remained in the road. When that failed to trouble him, she stepped into the row. I paid $38 to annoy you in person, she said. Then you should annoy me for at least an hour. Good. I packed a lunch. You did not. No. Luis dropped another leaf into the bucket. He was lean beneath his work shirt, his brown face cut with deep lines that made him appear stern even when his eyes were amused. Mara remembered him younger, playing cards in Amos's kitchen after harvest. He and Amos had argued about everything from pruning height to whether Willie Nelson could sing. Then Luis had stopped coming. He held up a leaf. What is wrong with this? Mara took it. Yellowing feathered outward from the veins. I don't know. You grew up on a vineyard. I also grew up with plumbing. I can't fix a toilet. Your grandfather taught you. How to fix a toilet? Luis stared at her. Potassium deficiency, she said. Maybe. Maybe is not an answer. It is when you're trying not to lie. He took the leaf back. Magnesium. Potassium burns first along the edges. That was going to be my second guess. You only get one crop. He resumed cutting. Mara followed him through the row. The vines were heavy with tight green clusters, weeks from changing color. Workers moved in the distance, their voices occasionally rising over the machinery. Luis handed her another leaf. Sunburn, she said. Leafhopper, a third, powdery mildew, dust. I'm doing well. You are trying to tell me you can restore 47 acres, and you cannot identify dirt. I'm trying to find out whether restoration is possible. Different question, is it? Luis dropped his clippers into the bucket. What did Amos teach you about fire, to get out before he did? The humor left his face. Mara looked down the row. He said rootstock could survive if the heat moved fast. That you don't judge by the canopy. You scrape the trunk above and below the graft, then wait for basal growth. What else? Water carefully. Damaged roots can't use what they used before. And cut away dead wood. When? Mara hesitated. Luis nodded as if she had answered. That is why I said sell. She handed him back the dusty leaf. When? Not until you know where the living wood ends. Prune too early, you make a dead vineyard look clean. You learn nothing. How long? Depends. Everyone says that. Because everyone wants nature to sign a contract. He bent, picked up the bucket, and headed toward a low metal building. Mara followed. How do I check 47 acres by myself? You do not. That's not helpful. It is accurate. Inside, the building smelled of fertilizer, warm metal, and coffee. Luis set the leaves on a workbench beside several paper bags labeled in black marker. He pulled a knife from his pocket. It was smaller than Amos's pruning knife and sharpened nearly to a point. Show me yours. Mara took Amos's knife from her pocket. Luis's gaze rested on its worn wooden handle. He let you keep that? I took it when we evacuated. You stole it. The fire had a competing claim. He held out his hand. She gave it to him. The blade was dull. Luis tested it against his thumbnail, made a dissatisfied sound, and reached for a sharpening stone. He asked about you, Mara said. Luis drew the blade across the stone. People ask about weather. It does not mean they like it. After the fire, he asked if your south blocks made it. All but 6 acres. I told him he should call you. He knew my number. He said you knew his. Luis turned the blade and sharpened the other side. That sounds like Amos. What happened between you? I told you. You said he criticized your grafting method. He criticized it at a growers' meeting while using the same method in his eastern rows. That also sounds like Amos. He could not bear to receive knowledge without making it his own. Mara watched the steady movement of Luis's hands. Did you tell him that? For 26 years. How did he take it? For 26 years. Badly. Luis wiped the blade and handed it back. The edge caught the overhead light. Start beside the chute you found, he said. Move downhill, one row at a time. Scratch no larger than a grain of rice. Mark anything green below the graft with blue tape. Green only above the graft gets yellow. Brown gets nothing. Why separate above and below? If the scion lives, you may save the original vine. If only rootstock lives, what grows may not be fruit you want. It can still carry a new graft. Mara opened the notes app on her phone. You have water? He asked. 1-gallon jug. Luis closed his eyes. It was a big jug. You need a tank. I need money. No, money buys a tank. You need a tank. Do you have one? Yes. Can I borrow it? No. She looked at him. He looked back. Do you know anyone selling one cheaply? She asked. No. Do you know anyone giving one away to a grieving woman with no common sense? Many grieving women. All of them have more sense. Luis picked up his clippers. There is a man near Woodland with used food-grade totes. Do not buy anything that carried industrial chemicals. Do not believe him when he says a smell will rinse out. Do not pay more than $60. How do I get it to Bellwether? You inherited a truck, temporarily. That means yes, not today. Luis glanced toward the long road she had walked up. How are you going home? I'm going to Bellwether. That was not my question. Expensively? His mouth tightened. He took out his phone. I can call a ride. I am calling one. I don't need... No one has ever needed help as loudly as you. He spoke in Spanish to someone named Rafael, then ended the call. My foreman will take you when he goes north. Thank you. You can thank him. Are you coming to see the vineyard? No. But you'll answer questions? No. You answered several. I made a mistake. Rafael drove her to Bellwether in an old Ford that smelled of peppermint gum and motor oil. He declined gas money, accepted Mara's promise that she would return the favor, and gave her 3 phone numbers for used water tanks. 2 went to voicemail. The third belonged to a woman who wanted $200 for a tote with a crack in a very repairable location. At the western rise, the chute's leaves had opened slightly since the day before. Mara crouched beside it and made the smallest possible scratch below the graft union. Green glimmered beneath the char. She tied a strip of blue survey tape around the trunk. It was tape she had bought on a credit card that afternoon, along with gloves, flagging stakes, a folding saw, 2 cases of bottled water, and sunscreen. The total had been $113.82, a number now carved into her memory. She moved to the next vine. Brown. The next was brown above the graft, but green low on the trunk. Blue tape. The 4th crumbled beneath her thumb. She stopped every 10 vines to record the row and count. Smoke residue coated her gloves. Dead bark slipped from the trunks in brittle plates. By dusk, she had inspected 63 vines and marked 11. The number should have encouraged her. Instead, every blue strip seemed lonely. Her phone rang while she was checking the 64th. Where is the truck? Grant asked. Good evening to you too. I'm at your apartment. That's unsettling. You left the coffee in a parking garage. You came to claim your vehicle. I simplified things. I came to give you the registration. Same noun. Grant made a sound as if he were pressing his fingers into his eyes. I have a meeting tomorrow. I can't spend another morning chasing you. Then don't. You need transportation. I'm aware. How are you getting to work? Bus? From the vineyard? Mara looked toward the farmhouse. Warm light filled the kitchen windows. Through them, she could see Celeste moving from counter to table with a dish towel over her shoulder. I'll figure it out. Why are you like this? Genetics. Fine. I'll leave the truck where it is. The keys are under your mat. You have a copy of my apartment key? Grandpa did. The image struck her with strange force. Amos, standing outside her apartment, impatiently fitting a key into the lock while she lay sick with the flu. She had forgotten giving it to him. Grandpa's keys belonged to the estate, Grant added. Mom gave them to me. Of course she had. Mara tightened the blue tape around another living trunk. I don't want the truck under these terms. What terms? That I own it? That you can take it whenever you need? To remind me I don't. I said, until October. I heard you. You're turning a favor into an insult. You're turning control into a favor. Silence. The light in Celeste's kitchen went out. Grant's voice changed when he spoke again, some of the Polish worn off. Not everything is about controlling you, Mara. Sometimes people put dates on things because they don't trust you to stop. She stared at the dark window. Stop what? This. Burning down your life to prove you can survive it. The line went dead before she could answer. Mara remained crouched between the rows. The workday caught up with her all at once. The night shift, the buses, the rideshare, the sun. Her hands shook when she tried to stand. She had eaten half a vending machine sandwich 15 hours earlier. The 2 cases of water sat at the bottom of the rise because she had been too tired to carry them up. She walked to the grave and pulled Celeste's folded offer from beneath the loose stone. The paper was damp along one edge. She opened it on Amos's marker and read the number again. It would clear her hospital debt. Leave enough to repair her car, if her car ever returned from the transmission shop. Maybe pay first and last month on an apartment farther from the highway, one where the bedroom window did not rattle when trucks passed. Below the number, Celeste had written in neat blue ink, I want you to have a chance to begin without debt. Mara read the sentence twice. Then she folded the offer, put it back beneath the stone, and checked 20 more vines by the light on her phone. 9 were alive. The following morning, Celeste had the locks changed on the farmhouse and office. Mara learned this when she walked across the lawn to look for the old block maps. Her key entered the office door but would not turn. Celeste opened the kitchen window above her. I need the Vineyard records, Mara called. Those records are in my building. They're records for my land, they're Amos's business files, and Peter advised me not to let original estate documents leave the house. I don't need estate documents. I need planting dates, rootstocks, and irrigation maps. I'll look. When? When I have time. Mara stepped back from the door. You changed every lock because I took a gallon of water? I changed the locks because ownership changed. You could have told me. I just did. The kitchen window slid shut. Mara stood on the porch with Amos's key in her hand. Through the glass, Celeste leaned against the sink and covered her mouth. It was the first time Mara had seen her aunt look less victorious than frightened. She walked back to the burned rose before either of them could make use of it. The pump house crouched at the bottom of the slope, its roof gone and concrete walls smoke-stained. Inside, the electrical panel had melted into a black lump. A metal service tag remained screwed to the pump casing beneath the damage. Shaw Pump Well. Below it, in faded marker, someone had written Eli and a phone number. Mara traced the name with one dirty glove. She had not spoken to Eli Shaw in 6 years. She entered the number anyway. A man answered on the second ring. Shaw Pump. Do you still make people sing before you give estimates? There was a pause. Then Eli said, Mara Bell? Behind his surprise, she heard the exact laugh she remembered. She looked at the ruined pump. I need you to tell me something terrible, she said. That also sounds familiar. He cleared his throat. How terrible! How much it costs to bring water back from the dead. Water's not dead, Eli said. It's just expensive. How expensive? I can't diagnose a pump over the phone. You used to diagnose my car by the noises I made. You made very specific noises. The pump house burned. The panel melted. The casing looks intact. Did the fire reach the wellhead? I don't know what that looks like. Then stop touching things until I get there. Mara glanced at the service tag. I didn't say I was touching anything. You called me after 6 years and opened with an insult. You're definitely touching things. He arrived 50 minutes later in a white service truck with a rack of pipe overhead and Shaw Pump Well painted on the door in dark blue. The lettering was newer than the truck. One fender had been replaced and never quite matched. Eli climbed out carrying a tool bag. He was taller than Mara remembered, though that was impossible, and broader through the shoulders in a faded gray t-shirt. His hair was shorter. There were fine lines beside his eyes that had not existed 6 years ago. He stopped several feet from her. You look terrible, he said. You look expensive. Still a nurse? Still a plumber? Pump technician. Plumber with acreage. His grin appeared slowly. It made him look, for one dangerous second, exactly 23 again. Then he took in the vineyard behind her, and the grin went away. I'm sorry about Amos. Thank you. I went to the service. Mara looked at him. You did? Back row. Your aunt seated me between a former county supervisor and a woman who tried to sell me essential oils. That was probably Bev. She said peppermint could align my valves. Aunt Bev has range. He shifted the tool bag to his other hand. Neither of them moved closer. Mara had last seen Eli in the Bellwether kitchen after Amos accused him of encouraging her to abandon the vineyard. Eli had said Amos did not need encouragement to drive people away. Mara, already packed to leave, had defended Amos simply because she could not bear to hear someone else say what she believed. Eli had walked out with a split lip after Amos's cabinet door caught him during the argument, though family memory had promoted the cabinet to a fist. Mara had intended to call him once she settled in Sacramento. Then, once she found a better apartment. Then, once enough time passed that the call would not require an explanation. Pump house is this way, she said. I remember. They walked downhill. Eli examined burned trunks as he passed, occasionally nudging debris with the toe of his boot. I heard Celeste got the house. News travels. My uncle handled the estate. Peter doesn't gossip. My father does. Peter tells him things like, I had a difficult meeting. Dad turns that into a 6-part radio drama. How is Martin? Stubborn, loud, offended by cholesterol. So, unchanged, mostly. At the pump house, Eli stopped Mara before she stepped inside. The concrete walls are stable, she said. You assess fire damage now? I watched 2 videos. Then I'm surprised the county hasn't hired you. He put on safety glasses and gloves, tested the doorway, and entered alone. Mara watched from outside while he photographed the panel and traced the supply line. He brushed ash from the pump casing, opened a metal cover, and used a meter at several points she could not see. Good news, he said. That was quick. It wasn't for you. I found my 10mm socket. He crouched beside the wellhead. Sweat darkened the back of his shirt. Mara looked away before he turned. Fire cooked the controls, he said. Wiring too. The motor may be gone, probably is, but I can't test it safely until the electrical side is rebuilt. Pressure tanks finished, some of the main line could be usable underground. How much? For basic service to the closest blocks? New panel, controls, tank, labor. Assuming the motor survived, 4, maybe 5,000. And if it didn't, add 3. Mara sat on a broken cinder block. That's the terrible thing. That's the first terrible thing. He opened the tool bag and took out a pad. Your filters are ruined. Valves above ground are warped. I saw melted pulley all the way up the slope. Restoring the old system across the vineyard isn't a repair. It's a rebuild. Approximate total. No. Eli. No honest contractor gives a total before mapping the damage. Give me a dishonest one. He considered her. More than you have? That could be $70. Is it? 83. His eyes moved to the bottled water stacked outside the pump house. I can replace the electrical work and tank at cost, he said. Labor free. If the motor's bad, I have a used 5-horse at the yard that might fit. No. Mara, write a real estimate. I just told you I'm offering, I heard you. It's my time. It's my pump. Those 2 things usually meet in an invoice. Exactly. Eli sat back on his heels. You haven't changed, neither have you. I have. I charge more, then write it down. He stared at her long enough to make the air uncomfortable. This isn't me buying a claim on you, he said. I didn't say it was. You didn't have to. The phrase so recently borrowed from Celeste made Mara flinch. Eli noticed. His anger cooled, but he did not retreat. Sometimes help is just help. Not in this family. I'm not your family. That's why I'd like to keep speaking to you. He looked toward the burned rose. Is that what we're doing? The question passed between them, carrying 6 years, a kitchen door, and every call she had never made. Mara picked up a flake of concrete and rubbed it between her fingers. Write a repayment plan, something I can actually meet. If you want to reduce the labor rate, reduce it. Don't erase it. You'd rather owe money than owe a person. Money keeps records. People do too. Then you understand. Eli stood and brushed off his knees. I'll write both numbers, full rate and the rate I'm willing to accept. You can be offended in duplicate. Thank you. That was an agreement. It was close enough to invoice. He went to the truck and returned with 2 orange steaks. He drove one near the pump house and another halfway up the first slope. "Until the well is working, you need hauled water," he said, "not bottles. The roots need deep watering, not sympathy. I'm trying to get a tank. I have a 200-gallon nurse tank. I'm not taking your tank for free. I'm not lending it to you. The frame needs welding, and I don't trust that truck you're pretending not to use." "How do you know about the truck?" "Grant called me." "Grant called you?" "He wanted to know whether you were here. Said you left the pickup in the hospital garage like a protest." "It was a protest. Then it was extremely inconvenient and poorly attended." The pickup appeared at the top of the slope before Mara could answer. Grant drove it down the service lane, followed by Colin in the Jeep. Dust rose around both vehicles. Grant parked beside Eli's truck. Colin continued toward the equipment barn. Mara walked uphill. "What are you doing?" Grant got out and held up the keys. "Returning your protest." "It isn't mine. Today it is." Colin backed the Jeep to the barn, opened the doors, and began dragging out crates. What's he doing? Collecting what he inherited. The pruning tools are Vineyard equipment. The will says movable equipment in the bottling and storage buildings goes to him. It says bottling equipment and antiques. Grant's expression told her he knew she was right and did not intend to referee. "Peter is sorting it out," he said. Colin is sorting it into his Jeep. Mara crossed to the barn. Colin had loaded 2 wine presses, a case of hand pruners, coiled hoses, and the portable generator Amos used during outages. "Leave the Vineyard tools," she said. Colin kept working. "Mom said anything from this building is part of the main estate. Mom doesn't own this building. It's on her side of the survey marker." The barn stood at the edge of the lawn, just above Mara's parcel. Amos had stored Vineyard tools wherever a roof did not leak, with no concern for future boarders. "Those pruners were used on my vines. They were used on Grandpa's vines, which are now my vines. Buy new ones." He lifted the generator. Mara grabbed the opposite handle. Colin looked at her. "Seriously? I need that to test the pump." Eli came up behind her. "No, you don't." She turned, not helping. "The generator can't safely power what's left of that panel." Colin pulled. "Can I have my property now?" Mara released the handle. The sudden shift made Colin stumble against the Jeep. "Careful," she said. "It's an antique." Grant covered his mouth with one hand. Colin shoved the generator into the cargo area. "You all think this is funny? That equipment is worth money." "So sell it," Mara said. "You've had an inheritance almost 48 hours. I'm sure it's exhausting." Colin slammed the hatch. "At least mine is worth something." The words hung there. Grant stopped smiling. Eli looked down. Even Colin seemed to hear the cruelty after it left him. Mara picked up the 1 pair of pruners he had dropped. "You missed these." Colin's face reddened. "Keep them." "Thank you. That wasn't close enough." He got into the Jeep and drove away. Grant handed Mara the pickup keys. "There's a registration copy above the visor. You don't have to speak to me to drive it." "How considerate." "I'm trying, Mara." "At what?" His mouth tightened. "October." He walked toward the farmhouse without answering. Eli watched him go. He always did think deadlines were a personality. He was student council president for 3 years. "I know. He fined me for unauthorized posters." "What posters?" "Vote Grant Bell." "Because he already bought the tie." Mara laughed before she could stop herself. The sound felt strange in the burned vineyard, but not wrong. Eli smiled, then pointed to the pickup. "If we reinforce the bed, it can carry 60 gallons safely over these slopes. I have food-grade drums at the shop, at cost, at a wildly predatory rate. Put it on the estimate." He pulled a roll of white tape from his truck, wrote on it with a marker, and stuck the strip to the back of her hand. It read, "Mara owes Eli $20 for professional insults." She examined it. Itemized. Good. First one's free. She peeled off the tape, folded it carefully, and put it in her pocket. They spent the remaining daylight marking a route for temporary water lines. Eli did not touch the vines, and Mara did not ask him to. When they reached the western rise, he stopped near Amos's marker. The green chute lifted from its circle of dark soil, blue tape bright against the burned trunk. "That the one?" he asked. Mara nodded. Eli crouched without touching it. "Root's doing a lot of work for 2 little leaves. It doesn't know any better. Maybe it does." Below them, orange stakes traced a crooked line toward the dead pump. For the first time, Mara could see something crossing the ruin that had not been there before. It was not water yet. It was not a plan she could afford. But it had direction. The direction led first to a welding shop behind Eli's yard, where a man named Curtis examined the pickup bed and announced that Amos had apparently repaired it with prayer and roofing screws. He didn't pray, Mara said, then just roofing screws. Curtis cut out 2 rusted sections while Eli measured brackets for the water drums. Mara sat on an overturned bucket with her work schedule open on her phone and watched the estimate grow. The pump repairs, even at Eli's reduced labor rate, would cost more than 2 months of her take-home pay. The temporary hauling setup added another $460 if the pickup needed no surprises. Curtis had already found 3 surprises and was searching for a 4th with professional enthusiasm. Mara accepted every extra shift Dana texted. She worked nights, slept in pieces, and returned to Bellwether each afternoon with 60 gallons of water strapped behind the cab. Eli had installed a small transfer pump and 100 feet of hose, both used, both listed on an invoice so detailed it included the zip ties. The first time Mara drove up the western slope, water surged to the downhill side of the drums and pulled the truck sideways. She hit the brake. The rear tires slid 6 inches in the loose ash. Mara remained frozen behind the wheel, one hand on the gear shift. To her left, the hill dropped toward a row of burned vines. To her right, a blackened steel post waited at window height. Eli, walking ahead, came back slowly. "Don't get out," he said. "I wasn't planning to. Take your foot off the brake gently. That feels like advice from someone who wants my truck. Turn the wheel downhill. That feels worse. The back end needs to follow gravity instead of arguing with it. The truck comes from an argumentative family. Mara." She eased off the brake. The pickup shifted. Her stomach did the same. Eli guided her backward until the tires reached firmer ground, then opened the driver's door. "We fill the drums halfway from now on. That means twice the trips. That means the truck stays shiny side up. It's not shiny on any side." He leaned one arm on the open door. "You're trying to water everything. I marked 216 living vines. You marked signs of life. That doesn't mean every vine will recover. They need water before I can know. They need water you don't have." The words stung because they were practical. Mara looked through the windshield at the western rise. Blue and yellow tape fluttered among the black trunks. Her markings no longer looked lonely. They looked like requests. "I can make more trips," she said. "On 2 hours of sleep? 3. Luxury. I'm not asking you to do it. No, you prefer endangering yourself independently." He stepped back. Mara shut the door harder than necessary. That evening, she made 3 trips from a filling station Luis had arranged for her to use. She sent him a photograph of each inspected row with her counts. He replied only when she made a mistake. "Row 9, vine 14, looks brown. It was green under the bark. Then your photograph is bad." Helpful. "I said it was bad." Mara sent a close-up. 5 minutes later, Luis answered. "Yellow tape, not blue. Green is above graft." She changed the tape. By the end of the week, her hands had small cuts beneath the gloves and a permanent tremor after midnight. Dana caught her asleep in the employee break room with her forehead against a vending machine. "That's not a pillow," Dana said. "It's firm. It's refrigerated. That's why I chose it." Dana set a paper cup of soup beside her. "Drink." "I'm not sick. You're gray. I work nights. You look like something a night coughed up." Mara lifted the lid. Chicken broth. Too salty and perfect. Dana sat opposite her. "How's outside?" 289 possible survivors. "Out of?" Mara drank instead of answering. "Mara, several thousand?" Dana leaned back. "Oh, I haven't inspected half the property." "Is that good?" "It depends. Don't become one of those people." "Too late." Her phone buzzed. Celeste. Mara let it ring. Dana watched the screen. Family? Aunt? The house aunt? There's only one relevant aunt. Answer. If she's awful, I'll pretend there's an emergency. You enjoy pretending there are emergencies too much. "I chose healthcare," Mara answered. Celeste did not bother with hello. "Where are you?" "Work. There are hoses crossing the upper service road." "One hose. It cannot remain there. It's rolled beside the pump house. It was across the road this afternoon, because water doesn't respond to shouting." Celeste lowered her voice, which was more threatening than raising it. I brought representatives from Holloway Ridge to view the property. One of them stepped in mud and nearly fell. Then the vineyard has already taught him something. You knew they were coming. I knew you were talking to someone. I didn't know strangers would be walking my land. We walked the boundary. The western rise is inside it. They wanted to see the view. Mara set down the soup. Dana made a questioning face. Mara shook her head. Next time, ask me, Mara said. I do not need permission to show people my home. You do to show them my field. It's not a field. It's a burned commercial site. To them, to anyone with eyes. Mara stared at the cinder block wall behind Dana. Someone had taped up a sign reminding staff that kindness costs nothing. An exhausted nurse had written, "Neither does silence," beneath it. What do they want to build? Mara asked. Nothing has been decided. What did they say? They see potential. That's developer for buildings. They restore historic properties. The vineyard identity is part of the appeal. The vineyard identity or the vineyard. Mara, I'm not having a semantic argument while you're at work. You called me. Celeste was quiet. In the background, a cabinet closed. Mara pictured the farmhouse kitchen, Amos's coffee mug on the second shelf, Celeste deciding whether it was hers now. The Holloway people want a unified site, Celeste said. They asked whether your parcel would be available after harvest. And I told them you were considering options. I'm considering one season. Which ends. Everything does. That is an extraordinarily expensive lesson to learn. The line went silent. Dana slid the soup closer. Mara ended the call. When she returned to Bellwether the following afternoon, small white flags had been placed along the lawn and western road. A survey crew was working near the farmhouse. They stayed on Celeste's parcel, but one flag stood 6 inches from the green chute beside Amos's marker. Mara pulled it out. Celeste came up the rise carrying 2 folders. She was dressed for business in cream trousers and low heels that sank into the ash. That marker cost money, she said. It was too close to the vine. It identifies the boundary. The boundary is 40 feet east. The surveyor put it there. Then the surveyor likes shortcuts. Celeste held out one folder, copies of the irrigation plans. Mara looked at it but did not take it. You asked for them. I did. Must every exchange involve a trial? Mara accepted the folder. Inside were photocopied block maps, pump specifications, and handwritten notes in Amos's square printing. Her throat tightened at the sight of it. Valve C sticks. Kick housing low. E4 grafted 2011, Luis method. Better take than expected. Mara read the line again. Celeste looked toward the grave. There are more records. I need time to sort personal papers from operational ones. Okay. The absence of a fight seemed to confuse them both. Mara tucked the folder beneath her arm. Thank you. Celeste brushed ash from the hem of her trousers. How many are alive? 312 with green tissue. More than half are rootstock only. Out of how many? I'm still counting. Celeste nodded. Her face revealed nothing, but she stepped closer to one trunk marked with blue tape. Does that mean this one survived? It means something below the graft did. So, not the Cabernet. Probably not, but the root may carry something new. Celeste bent slightly without touching the vine. Amos would hate that. He'd complain. He'd call grafting a shortcut. He used Luis's method in the Eastern Bloc. Celeste looked at her sharply. It's in his notes. A smile tugged at Celeste's mouth. Your grandfather once drove to Napa to lecture a man for doing exactly what he'd done the previous spring. Luis mentioned that quality. He and Luis were friends before you were born. I know. No, I mean real friends. Before every conversation became a contest. Mara glanced at Celeste. What happened? The same thing that always happened. Dad needed to be right, and Luis needed him to admit he wasn't. Whose side were you on? I moved to San Jose. It was such an honest answer that Mara almost laughed. Celeste straightened. Holloway Ridge is returning next Thursday. I will tell them not to enter your parcel. Thank you. But I will not tell them the land is unavailable after the season. It is unavailable now. Now is not October. Grant's word, handed down. Celeste walked toward the farmhouse, heels leaving deep punctures in the gray soil. Mara carried the folder to the pump house. She spread the maps over an overturned crate and traced the old irrigation zones. The western rise shared a main line with blocks 6 and 7. The eastern blocks ran on a separate branch. If any buried pipe remained intact, she could not supply both without pressure the rebuilt pump might not provide. She called Eli. "Tell me the truth," she said. "I haven't enjoyed any other version. If we restore the west and east branches, can the used motor carry them? Not together. What if I alternate? Depends on leakage. Assume average damage. After a wildfire, pretend nature signed a contract." He was quiet for a moment. "Maybe, but you won't know until we pressure test." "Why?" "Because I have to choose where the first water goes. You already chose the western rise. One chute isn't a block. Tell that to your back." A shadow fell across the maps. Luis stood outside the pump house, holding a paper grocery bag. Mara nearly dropped the phone. "I'll call you back," she told Eli. "I heard that voice. Is Mendoza there?" "Yes. Ask if he still owes my father $40. Luis heard him and said, "Tell Martin interest goes both ways." Eli laughed before Mara ended the call. She faced Luis. "You said you weren't coming. You sent bad photographs. That's not a reason to drive 12 miles. It became painful. He handed her the grocery bag. Inside were rolls of blue and yellow tape, a soil probe, and a box of sharpened grafting knives. "I can't afford these. They belong to Amos." Mara looked up. "He left them in my barn after our argument," Luis said. "Perhaps to make sure we had another." She lifted one knife. Amos's initials were burned into the handle. Why didn't he take them back? Why did he not call me? The question required the same useless answer. Luis unfolded the map. "Show me what you marked." They walked until sunset. Luis checked her scratches, corrected her labels, and cut deeper into several trunks she had considered alive. Brown tissue hid beneath the first green layer. He removed 3 blue ribbons, then 5 more. At the original chute near the marker, he knelt for a long time. "Good root," he said. "Strong." Relief loosened something in Mara's chest. Luis did not stand. "You have enough hauled water to keep perhaps 1 block alive through the hottest weeks. If the well repair is slow, less. I can make more trips." "No, you can kill yourself making trips and still not make rain." He pointed downhill toward the scattered tape. "You do not decide which vines live," he said. "Fire decided most of that. But now you must decide where work has a chance." Mara looked over the rows she had checked one by one. "How?" Luis pressed Amos's knife into her palm. "You stop counting green things," he said. "You start asking what they can become." Mara chose the western block because 87 roots had survived close enough together to share a line. She told herself that was the reason. Luis listened, then pointed toward Amos's marker at the top of the slope. "And the chute? It happens to be inside the block. Convenient. You said to ask what things can become. A contiguous block can become productive." "Yes." "The soil drains better here." "Yes." "The main line is shorter." "Yes." Mara glared at him. "You're enjoying this." "No." Enjoyment is louder. He marked the boundary on the map. Sentiment is allowed. It simply does not become science because you are embarrassed by it. I'm not embarrassed. Then say you want to save the vine beside your grandfather. I want to save the vine beside my grandfather. Good. Now it is one reason among several, instead of a lie among facts. Mara folded the map before she could use it to strike him. The eastern block had more living trunks, but they were scattered. Luis advised abandoning it until the well was restored. Mara tied white tape around the most promising row anyway. "That is not one of the colors," he said. "It means later. It means you do not know how to let anything go." Is that professional advice? It is available free. He walked back to his truck before she could invoice him for it. The white ribbons bothered her for the rest of the afternoon. They moved in the hot breeze like small acts of surrender, although she had intended the opposite. She watered the western block until dark, slept 4 hours at her apartment, and reported for work at 11. Dana took one look at her and removed a chart from her hand. "You're floating to observation tonight. I'm scheduled for emergency. You fell asleep standing up yesterday. I was leaning. You were holding a spoon. It wasn't sharp." Dana pointed toward the elevator. "Observation. Fewer opportunities to kill anyone with flatware." Mara obeyed because arguing required energy. During her meal break, she searched listings for a trailer. Staying at Bellwether would save nearly 2 hours of driving on Vineyard days, and giving up the apartment would free $1,200 a month after her lease ended. The numbers worked if she ignored food, dignity, and every repair a cheap trailer might require. A listing showed a cream and brown travel trailer parked behind a storage facility. The description called it vintage. The photographs called it tired. Mara met the owner after her shift. The trailer smelled faintly of mouse and strongly of lemon disinfectant. Its cushions were upholstered in orange flowers, one window had been sealed with kitchen caulk, and a patch above the bed looked like a map of Florida. Roof leak was repaired, the owner said. When? Before my brother died. I'm sorry. When did he die? 6 years ago. Mara pressed one finger to the ceiling patch. It gave slightly. The owner folded her arms. 800, 5, 750. The refrigerator doesn't work. You can use a cooler. The floor slopes. That's how you know where you are. Mara looked toward the narrow bed. After 3 night shifts, it appeared luxurious. 600 if you can tow it Friday. The woman held out her hand. Cash. Grant towed it. Mara had intended to ask Eli, but the pickup could not safely pull the trailer, and Eli's service truck was loaded with pipe. Grant learned about the problem from Celeste, and arrived with the flatbed truck before Mara had finished pretending she did not need anyone. He inspected the trailer hitch. This thing has brakes? He asked, optimistically. Lights? Emotionally? Grant crouched to check the wiring. You paid money for this? Not very much. That's still money. You own a lake cabin. Try not to sound jealous. He connected a temporary light bar without answering. On the drive to Bellwether, Mara followed in the pickup and watched the trailer sway each time a truck passed. Grant kept his speed low and used his hazard lights. At the Vineyard, he backed the trailer onto a gravel patch below the western rise on his first attempt. You've done that before, Mara said. Student council president. That explains nothing. We had floats. He disconnected the hitch and looked over the black rose. Blue and yellow tape now covered the slope. Mom says you're moving here. Only while the work is heavy. So forever. Probably. He went inside the trailer. Mara waited for the criticism. Grant opened a cabinet, closed it, and tested the faucet. No water hookup, I noticed. No power. There's an extension line from the pump house once Eli finishes. No sewage connection. It has a holding tank. That's not the same as a plan. Grant. He stepped back outside. I'm not saying don't do it. You're saying it smells like mouse. It smells like a mouse opened a lemonade stand. She laughed. Grant did too, but the ease disappeared when the farmhouse door closed uphill. Celeste stood on the porch watching them. Grant dusted his palms against his jeans. I should go. Of course. His face changed. What does that mean? Nothing. You use that word when you want someone to supply the accusation. Mara leaned against the trailer. You can help me as long as Mom doesn't see. I just drove a dead man's vacation trailer across 2 counties. It belonged to a dead man. It wasn't his vacation. You know what I mean. Yes. Grant looked uphill, then back at her. She thinks you're trying to make her the villain. I'm trying to get a working toilet. Those can happen at the same time. Before Mara could answer, he got into the flatbed and left. Eli spent the next 9 days rebuilding the pump system. Mara assisted when she could, which mostly meant carrying tools, reading labels, and being told not to stand in water while holding electrical components. The original motor failed every test. Eli brought the used 5-horse from his yard and dismantled it on a folding table. Mara cleaned the housing while he replaced bearings. You really keep every broken thing, she said. It wasn't broken. It was retired. It had wasps. They were tenants. Were they paying? Better than you. He handed her the estimate before installing the motor. Full rate appeared at the top. His reduced figure appeared below it, along with 12 monthly payments and a final line stating that any additional repairs required written approval. Mara read every item. You added interest, she said. 3%. Why? You demanded a real repayment plan. I did. And because you're going to miss at least one payment. I won't. Then I'll buy coffee with the $28. She signed. Eli signed beneath her, then tore off the carbon copy. Now we're speaking, he asked, contractually. I've had warmer relationships with county inspectors. The pump came on at 4:17 in the afternoon. It coughed, shuddered, and sent brown water through the clear test pipe. Mara watched grit churn past until the stream ran clean. Eli checked the pressure gauge. Don't celebrate yet. I'm not. You're smiling. It's a medical condition. They opened the western branch. Water traveled through the buried line and burst from a split 30 yards uphill. Eli shut the valve while Mara marked the rupture. They dug until sunset, cut away the damaged section, and spliced in new pipe. The second test held. At the first row, water dripped from 3 emitters, then 6, then the entire line. Mara knelt and pressed her fingers into the darkening soil. Beside Amos's marker, the small chute held 4 open leaves. "You can celebrate a little," Eli said. She sat back in the dirt and laughed. For 5 days, the system behaved. Mara checked every emitter before sleeping, and again before work. The western block received enough water to stabilize the new growth. Several yellow-tagged vines pushed leaves above their grafts. Even Luis admitted the pressure was better than expected. Then the temperature climbed past 100. Mara found the eastern row's white ribbons while carrying a roll of replacement tubing. Several buds had begun to swell beneath the burned bark. The row sat close to an old branch line, and the irrigation map showed a working valve. She called Luis. "No," he said. "I haven't asked yet. You want to open the east line. It's 38 roots. It is another damaged branch. The meter shows enough capacity if I alternate. The meter shows water leaving the pump. It does not show where it goes. I'll check the emitters. For how long? An hour? Check the end of every line. I know." "Then why are we speaking?" Mara opened the eastern branch before her night shift. Water reached the first emitters slowly. She walked the row, clearing clogs and replacing cracked connectors. At the final vine, a thin stream darkened the dirt. She set the timer for 2 hours, shut the western line, and drove to work. When she returned after sunrise, the eastern soil appeared damp. She slept in the trailer until noon, reopened the western branch, and repeated the switch that evening. For 4 days she alternated. The pressure gauge dipped each time the eastern branch ran, but the first rows received water. Mara assumed the old line needed time to fill. She checked the far end twice in darkness and felt moisture beneath the emitters. On the 5th morning, the trailer's water container ran dry while she was brushing her teeth. Mara stepped outside with foam still in her mouth and heard water moving where no water should be. Not dripping. Rushing. She followed the sound past the eastern block, through waist-high dry grass to a depression below the service road. Water bubbled from the ground, turning ash into black paste. The buried branch had split. Mara ran to the pump house and closed the valve. When she returned to the eastern row, she dug beneath the last emitter. The top inch of soil was damp from the little water that had escaped the line. Below it, the earth crumbled hot and dry through her fingers. Leaves she had seen unfolding 2 days before now curled against the trunks. She scratched one vine. Brown. She moved to the next. Brown again. At the 23rd vine, she stopped counting. Luis arrived while she was sitting at the end of the row, with her back against a charred post. He did not ask what happened. He walked the line, cut into several trunks, and shut his knife. "Maybe some roots," Mara said. Luis removed one white ribbon. "Maybe. I checked the emitters." "You checked in the dark. I felt water. You wanted to feel water." The distinction was unbearable. Mara looked toward the western rise. "I thought I could carry both." Luis sat in the dirt beside her, slower than he would have a few years earlier. "So did Amos," he said. "That isn't comforting. It is not meant to be." He handed her the ribbon he had removed. "You lost a row," he said. "Do not lose the lesson, because you are busy punishing yourself." Mara wound the white tape around her fingers until they hurt. Across the vineyard, the western leaves moved in the heat. The green chute beside Amos's marker was too far away to see. For the first time since she had found it, Mara understood that keeping one thing alive might require allowing another thing to remain dead. The dead row had to come out. Luis did not tell Mara this while she was sitting beside it. He returned the next morning with loppers, 2 shovels, and a steel pry bar. He laid them in the dirt between them. "You said we might have roots." "We might." "Then why remove anything?" "Because dead wood carries disease, and because every time you pass this row, you will invent a different ending." Mara picked up the loppers. "You practice compassion privately?" "Yes, it is safer." They cut the vines down to the crown, leaving enough trunk to mark where roots might still answer in spring. The first one snapped easily. The second resisted, fibers grinding beneath the blade. Mara expected each cut to feel like punishment. After 10, it became work. Luis piled the burned canes. Mara removed the white ribbons and tied one around the handle of the shovel. "For later?" he asked. "For remembering that later isn't a plan." He nodded. At the broken eastern main line, Eli exposed the split and waited for Mara to decide. I can splice it, he said. But if you open the branch again, you'll keep chasing leaks. Cap it. He looked up from the trench. Cap the whole east branch, she said. Until the western block is stable. You sure? No, that's usually how sure works. He cut the pipe and installed a cap. Mara watched water drain from the abandoned line into the dirt. The repair still goes on the invoice, he said. You didn't repair it? I repaired your ability to make the same mistake. That sounds like therapy. I charge less. Mara climbed out of the trench and brushed off her knees. Barely. Eli smiled, but the expression faded when his phone rang. He looked at the screen and sent the call to voicemail. Martin? Mara asked. My father has decided surgeons are salespeople with knives. That's not entirely wrong. He needs his shoulder repaired. Keeps canceling the appointments. What happened? 40 years of lifting things incorrectly. He says pain builds character. Amos said that. They shared several diseases. Eli's phone rang again. This time he answered. No, Dad. You can't use the hydraulic press to straighten your cane. Mara carried the discarded pipe toward the pump house, while Eli argued with his father. She could hear affection beneath the irritation, worn smooth by repetition. It made her think of the final year with Amos, how love had often looked like hiding his car keys or replacing salt with a low-sodium blend he claimed tasted like wet drywall. She had never told Celeste about those nights. At first, the visits had seemed temporary, then private. By the end, secrecy became easier than explaining why Mara could forgive Amos in small rooms, but not in front of the family. A line of black SUVs appeared on the county road shortly before noon. Eli ended his call. Friends, Celeste's. The vehicles parked beside the farmhouse. 3 people stepped out with folders, sunglasses, and shoes made for land they did not expect to touch. Celeste met them on the lawn. Grant came from the house carrying bottled water in a galvanized tub. Holloway Ridge kept to the marked boundary. Mara noticed because Celeste made a visible point of directing them away from the western road. She described the farmhouse, the intact cellar, and the views toward the lake. Her voice carried on the dry air, polished and warm. One of the visitors, a silver-haired woman in a linen jacket, asked about the burned rose. Celeste gestured toward Mara. The group turned. Here we go, Mara said. Eli picked up his wrench. Want me to look threatening? You're holding a tool named after a monkey. It has range. Celeste approached with the visitors behind her. Mara, this is Diane Holloway, her partner Susan Cho, and Daniel Price, their operations director. Diane offered her hand. I'm sorry about your grandfather. Thank you. We're exploring whether the house could become a small retreat property, Diane said. Agricultural restoration would be part of that, if feasible. Mara glanced at Celeste. On which parcel? Diane followed the glance and answered carefully. That depends on what becomes available. This one isn't. Celeste's grip tightened on the folder at her side. Susan crouched near a blue-tagged vine. Unlike the others, she wore work boots. Is this alive? She asked. The rootstock is. Will it produce? Not usable fruit on its own. It needs to be grafted. Susan studied the black trunk and new basal growth. How many survived? Enough to try. Diane smiled in a way that was not quite dismissive. Restoration is central to what we do. We don't believe history has to be erased for a property to function. The sentence was probably from a brochure. It was also reasonable, which irritated Mara more than arrogance would have. What would the vineyard become? She asked. A working demonstration block, perhaps, Daniel said. The visual identity matters. Guests respond to continuity. Guests respond to wine, Mara said. Susan's mouth twitched. Diane looked over the rose. Do you have a production estimate? I have leaves, Celeste stepped in. Mara committed to evaluating the vineyard through the season. Nothing beyond that has been determined. You determined it for them, Mara said. I described the situation. You described my land as a delay. I did not. Diane raised one hand. We don't intend to create conflict. Then you came to the wrong family, Grant said. Everyone looked at him. He stood by the tub of water, expression innocent. Celeste turned back to Diane. There are other sections of the property I'd like you to see. The group moved toward the cellar. Susan remained for a moment. My family lost an orchard to fire near Paradise, she told Mara quietly. We replanted 12 acres, saved 7 trees. Did it work? The trees lived, the partnership didn't. She gave Mara a rueful smile and followed the others. Eli waited until they were out of earshot. Well, that was comforting. She was honest. Dangerous habit. Mara watched Grant carry the tub after Celeste. He glanced over his shoulder once, not at Mara, but at the blue tape moving among the vines. The SUVs left an hour later. Celeste crossed the lawn while Mara was cleaning dirt from the capped pipe. "You embarrassed me," she said. "I answered questions. You contradicted me in front of people who are trying to make a serious offer. For your property. For a viable project. I'm not scenery for your project." Celeste looked at the pump house, the trailer, the open trenches. "And what are you building? A viable business?" "No." The quick admission stopped her. "Not yet," Mara said. "I'm trying to get 1 block through the summer. And after that? I don't know." "You keep saying that as if uncertainty gives you moral authority. It's more honest than promising land that isn't yours." Celeste pressed the folder against her chest. They lowered their preliminary range. Mara had not expected the directness. "Because of me?" "Because they cannot control access, views, or agricultural use." "So, yes, partly." "I'm sorry." "No, you aren't. I'm sorry your offer changed. I'm not sorry I own the reason." Celeste's laugh held no humor. "Do you hear yourself? Constantly. It's exhausting. You get to arrive after years away and make everything about what Dad wanted." Mara set down the pipe. Celeste continued before she could answer. "I handled his bills, his prescriptions, the insurance after the fire. I drove here every weekend while you were building your life somewhere else. I know." "Do you?" "Because he asked about you every time. He never asked whether I was tired." Mara looked uphill toward the farmhouse windows. "I came back? For the funeral? For him?" Celeste's face stilled. "I was here 3 or 4 nights a week during his last year," Mara said. "More after the fire. I cooked. I cleaned the oxygen machine. I changed the bandages on his leg when he pretended the visiting nurse had done it. You lived in Sacramento." "I drove. No. He would have told me. He didn't." Celeste stared at her. The hurt moved across her face before suspicion covered it. "Why are you telling me this now? Because you keep using my absence as evidence. Why didn't you tell me then?" Mara thought of Amos asleep in the recliner, of the television turned low, of sharing toast over the kitchen sink without discussing old injuries because some piece could survive only if no one named it. "I didn't want our visits turned into a vote," she said. "A vote on what? Who loved him more?" Celeste stepped back. "You think that's what I would have done? I think it's what all of us did. You let me believe he died waiting for you." The words struck harder than accusation. "I didn't know you believed that. You didn't ask." Celeste walked away. Mara followed her as far as the service road. "Celeste." Her aunt turned. Tears stood in her eyes, but her voice remained level. "You had him when he was gentle enough to apologize," she said. "The rest of us got the years when he wasn't. He wasn't gentle. He was with you." "No. He just got tired faster." Celeste shook her head. "That isn't the same thing." She crossed the lawn and entered the house without looking back. Mara returned to the pump house. Eli had disappeared, leaving his tools arranged on the folding table and the repair invoice beneath a wrench so it would not blow away. She worked until the light thinned. The western block needed its burned wires removed before new growth could be trained. Mara cut and pulled until her shoulders ached. When darkness made the metal difficult to see, she finally put down the pliers. A faint hammering sounded near the lower row. She followed it. Grant stood between 2 vines with his suit jacket hanging from a post. He had loosened his tie and rolled his shirt sleeves. One of the old trellis braces leaned against his shoulder while he drove it deeper into the ground with the flat side of a sledgehammer. "You're doing that wrong," Mara said. Grant jumped. The hammer struck dirt. "I'm aware." "What are you doing?" "The end post was loose. It's burned through at the base. I discovered that." He had brought 3 replacement posts in the flatbed. They lay in the grass with a coil of wire and a toolbox. Mara looked toward the farmhouse. "Does Celeste know? Mom is drinking wine with Colin and describing you with medical terminology." "Which terminology?" "I don't think vindictive parasite is clinical. Depends on the insurance code." Grant wiped his forehead with his sleeve. "I told her you'd been visiting Grandpa." Mara's stomach tightened. "Why?" Because she asked if I knew. And I knew you came sometimes. Not how often. Mara handed him the gloves from her back pocket. Grant looked at them. This doesn't fix anything, she said. I know. You don't get to help tonight and explain in October that I imagined it. I know. The brace goes outside the row. I did not know that. He put on the gloves. Together they lifted the burned post out of the earth. Under the black surface, the wood was pale and untouched where the soil had protected it. Grant stared at the clean grain. Some of it doesn't look burned, he said. It still can't hold the wire. He nodded, and they carried it away. They carried the old post to the burn pile and went back for another. Grant worked without skill, but not without effort. He swung the sledgehammer too hard, drove one post crooked, pulled it out, and tried again. By full dark, they had replaced 4. Mara found 2 beers in the trailer refrigerator, which did not cool but had become a useful cabinet. She opened them with the edge of a pruning tool and handed one to Grant. It's warm, she said. So is revenge. They sat on the trailer steps. The farmhouse glowed uphill. Through the kitchen window, Colin passed behind Celeste carrying a bottle. Mara waited for Grant to leave before they noticed him missing. He drank half the beer. Mom said you and Grandpa barely spoke after you moved. We barely spoke for a while. She said he kept trying and you ignored him. He didn't call me for 11 months. Grant peeled the label from the bottle. He told us he called. Maybe he did it silently. That's not funny. No. Grant rolled the paper into a wet tube between his fingers. I was angry at you. For leaving? For getting to leave. The answer shifted the shape of the conversation. You had your own apartment in San Jose, Mara said, that Mom paid for. I was working for her friend's insurance company and coming back every weekend because Grandpa needed help and Colin never answered his phone. I didn't know. You didn't ask. Celeste's words, now in Grant's voice. Mara looked at the blue strips visible in the truck's headlights. I thought you all wanted the vineyard. I wanted him to stop asking what I wanted to do with my life, like every answer was wrong. He did that. He asked you differently. No, I answered louder. Grant smiled, then rubbed his palms together. Blisters had started beneath the gloves. When did you come back? He asked. About a year before he died. And neither of you told anyone. He didn't want Celeste managing it. Managing what? Us. He said she'd turn every dinner into a reconciliation ceremony. She would have. I know. Grant rested his elbows on his knees. You let us hate you because family dinner would be awkward? I didn't know you hated me. I didn't know you were here. They sat with the equal stupidity of that. At last, Grant held up the empty bottle. Student Council Recycling Program. Behind the trailer, he stood. I can bring the tractor Saturday. Why? Because you need to pull the old end posts. I can't pay you. I didn't ask you to. I'm not doing the free help argument again. You have that argument often? Recently? Grant considered her. Rent it from me for $1. Sign something if it helps. It does. That's deeply strange. It's organized. He left before Celeste came down the hill. Grant returned Saturday with the restored tractor on the flatbed. The machine's red paint shone so brightly against the vineyard that it looked embarrassed to be there. He had also brought a typed rental agreement. Mara read it. You specified $1 per season, she said. I knew you'd try to return it tomorrow. You wrote that fuel is the renter's responsibility. I'm generous, not stupid. She signed. Luis watched from his truck. Amos would object to those tires. They're the tires Grandpa bought, Grant said. Amos often objected to himself through other people. Grant looked at Mara. Is he always like this? He's being charming. They pulled 42 burned posts before noon. Grant drove the tractor. Mara hooked chains around each base. Luis supervised while insisting he was not supervising. The work exposed the next problem. Dead wire ran through the rows in snarled lengths, some fused to the clips, some buried beneath fallen canes. Removing it by hand would take Mara weeks. You need workers, Luis said. I can't ask former employees to volunteer, then pay them? With what? Less money than the hospital pays you to fall asleep. Grant shut off the tractor. I can cover a crew. No, I knew that was coming. Luis addressed Grant. She will pay for everything twice if the second payment hurts more. That's unfair, Mara said. Is it inaccurate? She looked at the rows. A cleanup crew would cost nearly what she earned in 4 extra shifts, 4 nights under fluorescent lights, eating soup from a paper cup. Against that stood weeks of pulling wire alone, while new shoots tried to grow through it. "I'll pay 6 people for 1 day," she said. "Regular Vineyard rate, not family charity." Luis took out his phone. 10 people. 6, 8, and you provide lunch. 7, 8. I have already sent the message. The first workday began before sunrise with coffee, breakfast burritos, and more people than Mara had hired. Luis's foreman Rafael arrived with 3 workers from Mendoza Family Vineyards. 2 former Bellwether employees came carrying their own tools. Nina Graves, who had managed the tasting room for 9 years, brought gloves, wire cutters, and a cash box. "What's that for?" Mara asked. "Lunch money. I'm providing lunch. Then it's a tip jar. There's nothing to tip." Nina looked around at the burned rows. "People will find something." Mara counted 11 workers. "I can only pay 8. 3 of us are staying 4 hours, Nina said. "Same labor total. Don't make that face." I did Bellwether payroll while Amos tried to record wages on a wine-stained calendar. Grant arrived with the tractor. Eli came directly from an emergency pump call, smelling of diesel and carrying donuts. "You're not on the crew list," Mara said. "I'm a vendor." "For what?" "Sugar." Mara tried to keep track of everyone. She assigned rows, marked wire piles, and warned them about living trunks. Luis changed half her assignments. Nina changed the other half and gave Mara a burrito. The vineyard filled with sound. Wire snapped against cutters. The tractor engine rose and fell. Raphael sang off-key until someone threw a glove at him. People called to one another across the rows, using nicknames Mara had forgotten. For years, Bellwether had seemed to belong entirely to Amos, because his voice was always the loudest. With him gone, Mara heard how many other voices had built it. At 10, Celeste came down from the farmhouse carrying 2 silver coffee urns. Conversation quieted. She set them on the folding table. "The kitchen has power." Nina hugged her before either woman could decide whether they were ready. Celeste held herself stiffly, then embraced her back. "I made iced tea too," she said. "It's on the porch if someone can carry it." Grant went uphill without being asked. Mara approached the table. "Thank you." Celeste adjusted the stack of paper cups. "I had supplies. You still brought them. I can take them back." I said thank you. Their eyes met. Celeste looked toward the western rise. "Dad used to make everyone work until 2 before he fed them. He said hunger improves speed. He also wondered why people quit." Mara poured coffee. Nina's collecting tips. "Of course she is." A small smile passed between them and vanished. Celeste stayed for lunch. She sat beside Raphael on an overturned crate and argued about whether Amos's chili had contained cinnamon. Grant produced the old recipe from his phone. Colin did not come down, though Mara saw him once at an upstairs window. By late afternoon, the western block stood cleared. The living trunks no longer disappeared beneath tangles of dead wire. New trellis posts defined straight lines across the slope. The result was not pretty. Most spaces remained empty, but the block looked cared for. Mara paid every worker in cash envelopes Nina had prepared. When she reached Raphael, he counted his bills and returned $20. "You stayed all day," Mara said. "I broke your shovel. That shovel was older than both of us. Then buy at a funeral." He put the money in Nina's cash box and walked away. The box contained $186 in tips, enough to cover lunch, fuel, and part of the next workday. Mara looked for someone to argue with, but Nina had already driven off. Eli remained to coil hoses. "You could say thank you to an empty parking area. It wouldn't listen. That would be new for you." They worked side by side as the shadows lengthened. Eli's shoulder brushed hers when they lifted a pipe. "Dad's surgery is Tuesday," he said. He agreed. I told him they'd reassign his date if he canceled. He thinks another man stealing his operating room is a personal attack. Use what works. I may need help explaining the discharge instructions. I can do that. I can pay you. Mara looked at him. He raised both hands. I knew the language. Coffee, real coffee. Hazelnut, don't ruin this. After Eli left, Mara made one final walk through the cleared block. Loose wire remained near Amos's marker, half buried in the ash. She hooked it with a gloved hand and pulled. It held beneath a burned trunk. Mara braced one foot and pulled harder. The wire came free with a metallic shriek. Something green snapped. She froze. The chute beside Amos's marker lay against the dirt. severed just above its lowest bud. One of its 4 leaves was pinned beneath the wire she had dragged across it. No. Mara dropped to her knees. She lifted the cane carefully, as if the break might close if she aligned the edges. The stem bent where living tissue had torn. Clear sap shone at the wound. All day, 11 people had worked around it. Mara had marked it, protected it, built the entire western block around the fact of its survival. Then, alone after everyone left, she had destroyed it in one tired motion. She sat beside Amos's marker with the broken cane in her lap, the tip jar money pressed against her pocket. New posts stood straight down the hill. Water moved through the repaired line. Every practical thing she had accomplished remained true. None of it reached her. "I'm sorry," she told the marker. The words were too small for the empty space. Darkness gathered between the rows. Mara stayed there, holding the first green thing the vineyard had given her, until she could no longer see its leaves. Mara carried the broken shoot to the trailer, as though temperature, movement, or breath might injure it further. Under the weak ceiling light, she wrapped the stem in a damp paper towel and placed it on the counter. Then she called Luis. No answer. She called again. On the 3rd attempt, he picked up. Someone should be dying. "I broke it." "What?" "The shoot by Grandpa's marker. I pulled wire across it." Luis was silent long enough for her to hear fabric rustle as he sat up. "Where is the cane?" "In the trailer." "Did it dry?" "I wrapped it." "How many leaves?" 4. "One is damaged. Put the cut end in water." "Not the whole cane. I will come in the morning. Can it be saved? Go look at the root. It's dark. You have a light. Luis, go look." Mara found her headlamp and climbed back to the marker. The severed stem rose only 2 inches from the black trunk. She brushed dirt away carefully. "There's a bud below the break," she said into the phone. "Whole?" "I think so." "Then you did not kill the vine. I broke the only growth it had. Growth is not the root. It took months to push that. And now the root has leaves, water, and less work to carry. It may push again." "May." "Yes." Nature continues to refuse contracts. Mara sat beside the marker. Luis's voice softened. "The broken piece has 2 usable nodes," she counted. 3. "Maybe. We can try softwood cuttings. One may root, and if none do, then you save the root you have." "I'm sorry I woke you." "You should be. My wife already thinks Amos calls me from the grave." "You told her?" She answered the first call. Mara pictured Elena Mendoza handing over the phone with the patience of someone who had endured 40 years of vineyard emergencies. "Go sleep," Luis said. "You are more dangerous tired, I noticed." In the morning, Luis arrived with a plastic propagation tray, a bag of perlite, rooting hormone, and Elena's complaint written on a note. "Next time. Dead people call after 10, they leave a message." Mara taped it inside the trailer. Luis cut the broken cane into 3 sections, each centered around a node. The damaged leaf came off. He trimmed the others to reduce water loss, dipped the stems, and settled them into damp medium. "Too much leaf, they lose moisture," he explained. "Too little, they cannot feed themselves. Keep them humid, bright shade. No direct afternoon sun. They look butchered, they look prepared." At the marker, he examined the remaining bud through a magnifier. "Leave it alone," he said. "That's all? That is often all. You are bad at it." Mara covered the exposed soil with light mulch, placed 2 stakes around the trunk, and tied bright tape between them so no one could walk too close. Luis watched. "Perhaps add a fence and armed guard. I know a nurse who'd enjoy the work." Before leaving, he moved the propagation tray to his truck. "Where are you taking it?" "My greenhouse." "Your trailer cooks by noon. I can build shade. You can also sleep through watering after a night shift." "They're mine." "Yes." The word did not bend. Mara surrendered the tray. "Send photographs." "Bad ones." "Of course." The lowest bud opened 9 days later. Mara saw the green point before dawn and sat in the dirt to inspect it. She did not touch it. She did not photograph it until the sun rose. Then she sent the image to Luis, Eli, Grant, and Dana. Dana replied, "Is this the expensive weed?" Grant sent 3 exclamation points. Eli wrote, "Told you the root was doing the work." Luis did not answer for an hour. When he did, his message contained 2 words, "Needs water." Mara laughed so loudly inside the trailer that a bird flew out from beneath it. Martin Shaw's shoulder surgery happened the following Tuesday, after 2 cancellations and 1 attempt to leave pre-op because the hospital television did not carry a baseball game. Eli called Mara from the recovery floor. He says the surgeon stole his watch. Was he wearing one? No. Then anesthesia is working. Can you come by tonight? Mara arrived at Martin's bungalow with soup, a dry erase board, and a printed medication schedule. Martin sat in a recliner wearing a sling and the wounded dignity of a man betrayed by his own skeleton. I know how to take pills, he said. Excellent. Explain these. He picked up 1 bottle, squinted, and put it down. The little white one is for pain. They're all little and white. That seems irresponsible. Eli stood behind the recliner, rubbing both hands over his face. Mara wrote the medication names and times on the board, then drew a box beside each dose. When you take one, check it off, she said. If there's no check, don't guess. Ask Eli. I ran a pump business for 37 years, and now a pump business can follow a chart. Martin looked at her more closely. You're Amos's girl. Mara, I know your name. I was identifying the problem. Eli groaned. Dad. Martin smiled. She used to follow that old man through the vines carrying shears bigger than her arm. I was 19 the last time you saw me. Still too small for those shears. Mara set the soup on the side table. You still owe Luis $40. Martin's eyes brightened. He remembered? He says there's interest. The bet was whether Amos would admit Luis's graph took better. Who won? Luis. Which is why I didn't pay. That isn't how bets work. It is if the outcome threatens a friendship. Eli looked at Mara. Do you see what I inherited? Mostly accounts receivable. They stayed until Martin took his medication and ate half the soup. Mara returned the next evening after work because Eli had an emergency call. She changed Martin's bandage, made him walk to the kitchen, and listened while he explained every pump failure Bellwether had suffered since 1988. When Eli came home, he found them arguing about Amos's irrigation schedule. You don't have to keep doing this, he told Mara on the porch. I know. I can pay, she pointed at him. Coffee, he corrected. Real coffee. You can fix the trailer faucet. It leaks. That is dangerously close to plumbing. Stay within your limits. He smiled. The porch light caught the tiredness beneath his eyes. Mara? What? Thank you. She let the words stand without converting them into debt. The hottest weeks passed. The Western Bloc held. Not every root responded. 22 died despite water. 11 produced weak shoots Luis advised removing, so the roots could rest. Mara learned to stop interpreting every loss as a verdict. Grant came after work twice a week, usually without telling Celeste. He repaired wire, drove the tractor, and brought food too elaborate for the trailer's single burner. Once he arrived with mushroom risotto in a copper pot. Did you make this? Mara asked. I own a lake cabin jointly with Colin. I contain mysteries. You ordered it. I plated it. By late August, the rows were green in broken sections. New shoots climbed fresh wire. Empty spaces remained, but the living vines had begun to define the block instead of the dead ones. Luis sent a photograph from his greenhouse. One cutting from the broken shoot had rooted. Fine white threads showed against the side of its small black pot. Mara saved the photograph in 3 places. Celeste did not come down after the workday. She left operational records in sealed folders on the trailer steps and communicated by brief messages about boundaries, utility access, and survey appointments. Mara replied just as formally. Their politeness became a locked door neither wanted to admit existed. The Holloway Ridge vehicles returned twice. They stayed near the farmhouse. In October, Celeste asked Mara to meet at Amos's marker. The day was cool enough for a jacket. The western leaves had begun turning gold along their edges. Beside the stone, the first vine's second shoot stood 18 inches tall, trained between 2 stakes. Celeste carried the original purchase offer in a new folder. You left yours under the marker, she said. Mara glanced at the loose stone. You found it. I came to bring flowers. There were none now. Celeste held out the folder. Diane needs an answer. Their option on the house expires Friday. Mara did not take it. The season is over, Celeste said. Not until dormancy. Dad always called harvest the end. There was no harvest here. Celeste looked across the recovering block. Will there be one next year? No. Maybe a little fruit in 2 or 3. And enough to support this property? Not for longer than that. Then what did the season prove? Mara considered the question. It had proved that 87 promising roots could become 54 living vines. That water costs more when carried by hand. That one broken shoot could become a root in a greenhouse and another shoot in the ground. That Grant knew how to cook, Louise knew how to forgive without admitting it, and help did not always leave fingerprints around her throat. It proved, "I want another season," she said. Celeste closed her eyes briefly. "Holloway will reduce the offer again or walk away. I know. You'll keep the land, even if nothing comes of it. Something already has. That isn't an answer I can use. It's the only one I have." Celeste pressed the folder against Mara's chest until Mara took it. "I hope this becomes enough for you," she said. She walked back to the farmhouse. The first rain began before she reached the porch. Mara stood beside Amos's marker, while drops darkened the dry earth. Below her, the new shoots shook under the water, their leaves bending but holding. She opened the folder. Celeste's offer had increased slightly. Mara closed it again and sheltered it beneath her jacket as she walked downhill. It was still someone's careful work, even if the answer was no. Mara stopped at the farmhouse instead of returning to the trailer. Celeste opened the door before she knocked. Her gaze dropped to the dry folder beneath Mara's wet jacket. "I'll tell Diane no," Mara said. "That isn't necessary. It is if you're still waiting. I understood you at the grave." Rain ticked against the porch roof. Behind Celeste, towels covered the floor beneath two windows. Water had begun to leak through the old frames. Mara held out the folder. "I'm sorry it affects your offer." Celeste did not take it. "Holloway isn't going to buy the house alone. They might. They won't. Diane called while we were on the hill. The speed of it made Mara suspicious, then ashamed of the suspicion. Celeste had known the likely answer before she asked. "What will you do?" Mara said. "Keep the house. You hate this house." "I didn't say that. You said the upstairs bathroom smelled like old men and despair." "It does." Mara waited. Celeste finally accepted the folder. "I'll make it work." The words sounded so much like Mara that neither acknowledged them. Colin arrived the next morning and did. He parked the Jeep across the entrance to Mara's service road, forcing her to stop on the county shoulder. When she walked up, he stood beside the hood with his arms crossed. "Move it. You cost Mom a sale. Move the Jeep." She had a cash offer. "For her house and my land. You could have sold and leased back enough acreage to play farmer." Mara looked past him. The western rose shone wet after the rain. "You need to move. What's your plan? Work hospital shifts until you're 60 and pour every dollar into dirt?" "That's between me and 60. It affects everyone." "No, it affects the deal Celeste wanted. It affects the cabin." Mara looked at him. Colin's expression hardened because he had revealed the real subject. "What about the cabin?" "Mom advanced money for repairs. Grant said we'd repay her after the sale. You inherited the cabin. It needed a new roof. There's erosion near the deck. Nothing Grandpa left was as clean as Peter made it sound. So sell it. Grant won't. Then that is between you and Grant. Everything's between everyone in this family. That's the problem." He opened the Jeep door, but did not get in. "You know what Grandpa said when I told him I wanted the bottling equipment?" Colin asked. He said, "At least one of you understands machinery has value." I thought he was proud of me. Maybe he was. He told Grant the tractor was the heart of the vineyard, told Mom the house held the family together, told you the roots mattered. He handed everyone a different sentence and let us turn it into religion. The insight was sharper than Mara expected from him, which showed how little she had expected. "What did he keep for himself?" she asked. Colin gave a bitter laugh. "The right to be missed." He moved the Jeep. Mara drove past, then stopped beside him. The portable generator belonged to the main estate. The hand tools should have stayed with the vineyard. Colin stared at her. "I'm not pretending you were right," she said. "I'm saying you're not wrong about everything." "Generous. It's a family problem." He almost smiled. Winter changed Bellwether from black to silver. Mara cut the dead trunks while the living vines went dormant. Louise taught her to make grafting cuts on discarded wood until she could join two pieces without leaving air between them. He brought drought-tolerant scion selections from blocks that had performed well through dry summers and made her record every graft by row and vine number. "Memory is not a system," he said. "It was Grandpa's system." "Exactly." The rooted cutting from the first shoot remained in Louise's greenhouse through winter. Mara visited it more often than she visited most people. When spring warmed the soil, she planted it in a nursery row below the trailer, where she could shelter it from wind and watch its roots develop another year. The original vine beside the marker pushed 2 canes. Mara kept one. Balance, Louise said. Which one? The stronger. They're equal. Then choose. She chose the cane facing east because it would be easier to train. Louise said nothing, which was how she knew the answer satisfied him. The work expanded only when the system could carry it. Mara restored 3 acres the second year, 5 the third. Some blocks were replanted entirely. Others kept old root systems and received new grafts. Louise arranged a machinery exchange with 2 neighboring growers. Bellwether provided paid labor during their harvest weeks. And in return, Mara used their mower, cultivator, and sprayer on scheduled days. Grant's restored tractors stayed in Bellwether's equipment shelter under the $1 lease. Each autumn he printed a new agreement, changing one unnecessary clause to see whether Mara read it. She always did. The second year, he added that the renter must not permit goats in the operator's seat. There are no goats, Mara said. That's why compliance should be easy. The third year, Mara added that the owner was responsible for delivering 1 mushroom risotto per quarter. Grant initialed the change. The farmhouse grew quieter. Colin sold most of the bottling equipment, then blamed Grant when the money disappeared into cabin repairs. Grant wanted to rent the cabin. Colin wanted to sell it. Their arguments arrived at Bellwether through slammed doors, clipped phone calls, and Celeste's habit of walking the lawn after dark. The Holloway Ridge deal did not return. Celeste took consulting work with a hotel group in San Francisco and spent 3 days a week away. The farmhouse roof needed repair. Insurance premiums rose after the fire. She never asked Mara for money, and Mara did not offer what she did not have. They developed a careful peace. Celeste brought copies of records. Mara delivered coffee when contractors worked on the roof. They discussed irrigation easements, road maintenance, and weather. They did not discuss Amos's final year. Eli repaired the trailer faucet, then the roof, then refused to repair the refrigerator because some deaths are natural. Mara bought a used one. Their repayment arrangement lasted 14 months instead of 12. She missed 1 payment after the hospital reduced overtime. Eli circled the late fee on the invoice and wrote, "I have purchased the promised coffee. It was terrible." She paid the missed installment 2 weeks later. When the final balance reached 0, Eli brought the receipt to the Vineyard. Mara read it. "You misspelled satisfaction. I'm a plumber, pump technician. Now that you've paid me, I can be honest." She folded the receipt and put it in her pocket. "Does this mean we stop speaking?" "I was hoping it means we start." They were standing behind the trailer in the smell of cut grass and hot metal. Eli looked nervous, which Mara had never seen when he handled electricity, collapsing trenches, or Martin. "We've been speaking," she said. "You know what I mean." She did. "I'm bad at arrangements without payment schedules. I noticed. What if I need terms? Then we write them. What if I change my mind? Then we cross something out. What if you do?" Same pen. Mara kissed him before she could convert the moment into administration. It was not a dramatic kiss. Eli's cap bumped her forehead, and Mara laughed against his mouth. He took the cap off, dropped it, and kissed her again. From the western rise, Louis shouted, "Waterline!" They separated. Eli looked uphill. He has extraordinary timing. He's been practicing for 60 years. The third spring brought the first real fruiting canes. Louise advised removing most clusters so the young vines could put strength into roots. Mara walked every row with thinning shears, cutting away fruit she had waited years to see. "It feels criminal," she said. "It is arithmetic. You hate joy. Joy is easier to carry when it is not attached to a weak trunk." She left a small crop in the strongest western rows. If weather held, it might produce enough for a test lot rather than commercial release. Weather did not hold. The frost warning arrived in April, after an early warm spell had pushed tender growth across the block. Forecast temperatures dropped from 34 degrees to 28 in a single update. Mara stared at her phone inside the trailer. At 28, new shoots could die. At 26, developing clusters could be lost. The western slope collected cold air near its lower edge, exactly where the strongest fruiting rows stood. She called Luis. "I saw," he said. "What can we do? For 5 acres? Protect the most advanced rows. Your pump cannot carry overhead sprinklers across everything. I can haul water. Not enough. Orchard heaters? After the fire? The question went quiet between them. Mara looked through the trailer window at the blackened trunks she had preserved along one memorial row. She could still smell smoke on damp mornings, though Eli said it was memory. I can do heaters, she said. You need people. Mara sent messages to everyone who had worked the first cleanup day. She offered the regular night rate and expected 4 replies. 17 people came. Grant brought the tractor and a trailer of rented heaters. Raphael arrived with wind machines borrowed from a pear orchard. Nina set up coffee beside the pump house. Dana came directly from the hospital, wearing scrubs under her coat. Celeste walked down from the farmhouse carrying blankets. Even Colin arrived in the Jeep with the portable generator he had inherited. He unloaded it without comment. At midnight, the temperature reached 30. Warm air from the heaters moved unevenly through the rows. Frost began whitening the grass beyond them. Mara walked the western block, checking leaves, fuel, water pressure, and the nursery vine below the trailer. At 2, the wind machine nearest the lower rows stopped. Raphael opened the housing. Belt. Do we have one? No. The temperature fell to 28. Eli knelt beside the machine with a flashlight. Grant brought tools. Colin held the light and was told repeatedly that he was holding it wrong. Mara stood among the vines while ice formed along the new wire. The leaves curled slightly at their edges. What do they need? Celeste asked beside her. Morning. They worked until it came. At sunrise, the western rows glittered white. No one celebrated. Frost damage did not reveal itself at once. The leaves had to warm before they showed what the cold had taken. Mara walked to Amos's marker. The original vine stood beneath a cloth cover, its canes cold but green. Below her, 17 adults waited among the rows, hands wrapped around paper cups. The sun reached the first leaves. They darkened. Some softened into water-soaked brown. Others lifted toward the light. The frost took 37% of the new growth. Luis made Mara wait 4 days before pruning anything. She walked the rows each morning, watching damaged leaves collapse and healthy ones harden beneath the sun. Do not cut because brown is ugly, he said. The vine decides what it no longer needs. You've been waiting years to say that to me. I could have said it the first day. You did, in 12 less useful ways. Secondary buds opened along several canes. Some carried tiny clusters. Most did not. The strongest rows retained enough fruit for the test lot, though the crop was smaller than small. Mara paid every person who had worked the frost night. Nina returned her envelope unopened. Mara drove to her house and pushed it through the mail slot. The next morning, the envelope appeared beneath the trailer door with a note. Tip jar. Mara carried it back. Nina's door opened before she reached the porch. They repeated the exchange until Nina threatened to report her for harassment. In the end, Mara accepted 4 hours of donated time and paid the other 5. People are allowed to give you something, Nina said. So I've been told. By exhausted people, I assume. Mostly. The surviving fruit changed slowly through summer. Green berries softened, then darkened toward purple. Mara measured sugar, acidity, and growth. She recorded heat spikes, water use, leaf condition, and every treatment. Bellwether no longer depended on one person's memory or moods. When Luis saw the binder, he flipped through several pages and said, "Too many notes." Mara took it from him. "That's the nicest thing you've ever said." He brought his refractometer twice a week as harvest approached. Mara owned one, but he distrusted it on personal grounds. "The reading is the same," she said, "today. Instruments do not become less accurate because you dislike the store. That store also sells decorative barrels. Unforgivable." Grant joined the sampling rounds after work. He ate the grapes instead of spitting them out and claimed this gave him a more complete understanding of ripeness. "It gives you a stomach ache," Mara said. "Knowledge has costs. You sound like Grandpa." Grant stopped chewing. The comparison no longer pleased or insulted any of them automatically. It simply required inspection. Sometimes he knew things, Grant said. Sometimes. Colin came to Bellwether less often. The cabin had been listed, unlisted, then listed again after a fight about price. He and Grant communicated through Celeste, even though both men complained that she interfered. One afternoon, Colin arrived while Grant was greasing the tractor. "I need to talk to him alone," Colin told Mara. "You're already talking to him." Grant slid out from beneath the machine. What? We have an offer on the cabin. We have an insult on the cabin. It covers what we owe Mom, and leaves nothing after repairs. Nothing is what we have now. Grant wiped his hands. I told you I'm not selling at that number. Colin looked at the tractor. Then, sell this. No, you use it here more than anywhere, because it's mine. So is half the cabin. Exactly half. Their voices sharpened with the efficiency of a practiced argument. Mara put down the sample bucket. Leave the tractor out of it. Colin turned to her. Of course you'd say that. You get free equipment while Mom carries the house and I carry the cabin. Grant carries the cabin too. Grant carries posts around your field and calls it a personality. Grant stepped forward. Mara got between them before either man could mistake old resentment for a plan. I pay for the tractor, she said. $1, Colin said. Grant set the price. If he takes it tomorrow, I replace it with a shared machine from Mendoza. Grant looked hurt. Mara ignored him. The tractor is not holding me here. The cabin is not stopping you from leaving. Decide what you want without making the vineyard responsible. Colin's eyes moved over the western rows. Fruit hung in loose clusters, uneven but real. You sound like him now, he said. Then you should ignore half of it and complain about the rest. A laugh escaped Grant. Colin fought his own, lost, and covered it with a cough. The fight did not resolve. It became smaller. They went inside the trailer and argued over coffee with the financial statements spread across the orange-flowered bench. Mara left them there. By evening, they had agreed to counter the cabin offer together. Before Colin drove away, he stood beside the nursery row. That's the broken one? He asked. The cutting from it. The propagated vine had grown into a sturdy plant with 2 canes. Its leaves were slightly darker than those on the original root near the marker. What do you do with it? Plant it somewhere permanent after dormancy. Beside Grandpa? There's already a vine beside Grandpa. Colin nodded as though this were an answer to something else. Harvest began at 4:30 on a cool September morning. Mara had 30 picking lugs, 8 workers, a borrowed flatbed, and enough nervous energy to power the pump without electricity. She checked the same row 3 times before Louise took the refractometer out of her hand. The sugar will not change because you threaten it. It could have changed overnight. It did. I tested at 4. You've been here since 4? I was avoiding Elena's list of house repairs. The first cluster came from the vine below Amos's marker. Mara held the stem while Louise cut it. The fruit was not perfect. Several berries were smaller. One had split, and the cluster weighed less than her phone. Louise placed it in the lug. That's it? Mara asked. Would you like music? Acknowledgement. I acknowledged it with shears. Grant had brought a portable speaker. He turned on a brass fanfare from an old movie. The workers applauded. Mara covered her face with both hands. Better? Louise asked. Much worse. They moved down the rows. By 8, the lugs were filling. Raphael called weights. Nina recorded them. Eli repaired one wheel on the flatbed after it began wobbling. Dana arrived after her shift, changed shoes beside the trailer, and picked for 2 hours without speaking more than 6 words. Celeste watched from the farmhouse porch. Mara waved once. Celeste lifted her coffee cup, but did not come down. The entire crop fit on one flatbed with room left over, 1,120 pounds. A respectable vineyard could produce that from part of an acre. Bellwether had used 5. Mara stood beside the load, as if it were a parade float. What now? Grant asked. We take it to Luis's crush pad. I meant what happens to the grapes. So did I. At Mendoza Family Vineyards, the fruit went through a small destemmer Luis had cleaned for the test lot. Colin arrived in time to help. I heard you needed someone who understands valuable machinery, he said. You sold yours, Mara replied, which demonstrates knowledge of market conditions. He adjusted the feed rate correctly on his first attempt. Dark fruit dropped into the bin. Juice stained Mara's hands and splashed her shirt. The smell was green, sharp, and faintly sweet. They filled a small fermentation tank, small enough that Luis called it the teapot. For 2 weeks, Mara came before work and after work to check temperature and perform punch-downs. Luis sent her home twice. Elena sent her home 3 times and packed food for her on each occasion. The wine had good color and firm acidity. Whether it had character or merely damage remained unclear. At the first barrel tasting, Luis poured a sample into 2 glasses. Mara smelled dark cherry, herbs, and something dry she could not name. Smoke? She asked. No smoke taint, he said. The fruit grew years after the fire. I know, I mean the smell. Luis tasted. Stone, tea, char. That sounds like a fireplace. It tastes like the block. He did not say it was good. Mara waited. Luis tasted again. Do not ruin it. From him, it was a medal. The wine needed months to settle. Some days it tasted thin. Other days the structure tightened and the fruit emerged. Mara rejected a label design featuring flames. She rejected one featuring Amos's face. Grant designed a plain cream label with Bellwether West Block in small black letters and the year beneath it. People need a story, Colin said. They can taste first, Mara replied. You're bad at sales. I inherited outside. The line made Celeste smile when she heard it. She had come to Louise's cellar for the final blending trial, her first visit to anything involving the wine. Mara handed her a glass. Celeste held it to the light exactly as Amos had in the photograph he hated. Don't make the face, Mara said. What face? The constipated one. Celeste nearly spilled the wine. She tasted twice. It's not his Cabernet, she said. No, he would complain, definitely. Celeste breathed in again. He'd pour another glass while doing it. The first local order came from a restaurant owner who attended the blending trial. 48 bottles, contingent on the finished wine remaining stable. A small wine shop requested 3 cases. Luis warned Mara that scarcity made people enthusiastic, and enthusiasm did not make a business. The orders would not repay the restoration costs. They would cover property taxes, next season's grafting material, and part of a commercial permit. Mara pinned the purchase orders inside the trailer beside Elena's note. Celeste listed the farmhouse with a local agent after the roof repairs consumed the last of the estate cash. Without the vineyard or ridge access, the expected price was lower, she told Mara at the grave, where the two of them had somehow begun holding difficult conversations. I can't keep carrying it, Celeste said. Mara looked at the house. Do you want to? I wanted it when Dad had it. That isn't the same thing. No. They stood beside the marker. The original vine had gone dormant, its cane brown and hard against the wire. Did you plan this? Celeste asked. Not the wine. The rest of it. Making us watch the thing we laughed at become the only inheritance anyone talks about? Mara considered lying, because the truth sounded sentimental. I planned to keep one shoot alive. Celeste touched the top of Amos's stone. He left you his grave, and 47 acres of expenses. He left me rooms full of him. The jealousy beneath her words was old and almost childlike, though neither woman was. Mara looked at her aunt. I thought he left you the desirable part. So did I. For the first time, they laughed together without someone else causing it. Mara took an envelope from her jacket and held it out. Celeste's expression closed. I'm not selling you the house. It's not an offer. Inside was an invitation printed on heavy cream paper. First Bellwether Harvest Supper. Celeste read it. Everyone will be there, Mara said. Workers, neighbors. Grant. Colin. If they're speaking by then, you're serving the wine? The first bottles. Celeste looked toward the renewed rose. You want me there? Mara could have made the invitation into victory. She could have told Celeste to come see what had grown from the worthless part, to sit beneath the name she had tried to sell around. Instead, she said, I want you to decide. Celeste folded the invitation along its original crease. Your grandfather hated outdoor dinners, she said. He hated wind in his napkin. He blamed the weather personally. I have clips. Celeste put the invitation in her pocket. She did not answer. The supper required 20 folding tables, 87 chairs, 200 napkin clips, and 3 separate arguments about string lights. The lights should follow the rows, Grant said. They should cross the rows, Colin said. Otherwise, it looks like an airport. You've never been responsible for an airport. I've seen one. Mara stood beneath a ladder, holding a box of bulbs. If either of you falls, Dana is off duty. Dana, arranging silverware nearby, called, I'll watch. That's not the same as helping, Grant said. It is an emergency medicine. Eli came down the ladder with a length of wire between his teeth and moved the lights diagonally. Neither brother approved, which made it the correct decision. The supper tables ran along the western block, close enough for guests to see the renewed vines without sitting in the rows. Blackened trunks remained along the memorial strip at the edge of the gathering, preserved between new green plants. Mara had resisted every suggestion to hide them. At noon, Grant returned with the flatbed carrying Amos's old dining table. Mara set down a crate of glasses. "What are you doing? Mom said you'd need a serving table. That thing weighs as much as the trailer. It contains dense memories." Colin lowered the tailgate. "She said it belongs here tonight." "Is she coming?" Neither answered. They carried the table to the head of the western row. Its surface bore 40 years of scratches, wine rings, and one scorched corner from the time Amos set down a hot skillet and blamed the varnish. Mara ran her hand over it. The family had eaten around that table after harvests, funerals, fights, and days nobody remembered because nothing had gone wrong. Amos had conducted conversations from one end, correcting facts that did not need correction. Celeste had sat nearest the kitchen. Grant and Colin had competed over the chair with the least wobble. Mara had spent half her adult life believing everyone else belonged there more naturally. "Put it in the middle," she said. Grant looked surprised. "Not at the head," Mara added. "There isn't a head." They placed it between the folding tables. The first guests arrived carrying food, despite the invitation's request that they bring only themselves. Elena Mendoza brought 3 trays and explained that instructions written by vineyard owners had no authority over kitchens. Nina arrived with flowers and old wine bottles. Raphael brought a new shovel with a black ribbon tied around the handle. "For the one we buried," he said. "It never received a funeral. Then this is closure." Martin Shaw came in a pressed shirt with his repaired shoulder, and the cane he had not straightened in the hydraulic press. He gave Luis 2 $20 bills. Luis counted them. "No interest. Interest is for debts between strangers. You have been avoiding me for 15 years. Yes, that makes us family." They embraced with the restrained violence of men who preferred conflict to tenderness. Mara moved among the tables, checking place settings, water pitchers, and the bottles of Bellwether West Block, waiting unopened in wooden crates. There were only 60 bottles for the supper. The rest of the tiny release had gone to the restaurant, the wine shop, and a handful of direct buyers. Every bottle represented more years of work than the price could explain. Eli found her counting them for the 4th time. "No one stole one," he said. "One box has 11. Because Luis took a bottle for the kitchen sauce. He used a finished bottle in sauce. It's his cellar. It was his cellar. You want me to get it back?" Mara pictured Eli approaching Elena's kitchen to reclaim cooking wine. "I'm not paying your medical bills." He took her hand. "Stop counting. I'm hosting 87 people in a field. You hosted 17 people during a frost while everything tried to freeze. That was different. Why? We were too miserable to have expectations." Eli looked over the tables. They came before the wine existed. "I think they'll survive dinner." A sedan turned into the drive. Celeste parked beside the farmhouse and remained behind the wheel for a moment. She wore a dark green dress and carried a pie dish covered in foil. When she approached, conversation changed but did not stop. Mara met her at the edge of the lawn. "You came. I made pie." "That wasn't the question." "I know." Celeste looked at the old table. "Grant told me where you put it." He disagreed. He believes furniture should understand rank. He comes by it honestly. Celeste adjusted the foil over the pie. "The agent held an open house this morning. How was it?" 3 couples admired the view. One man asked if the smell from the vineyard would be a problem. "What smell?" I asked him the same thing until he became uncomfortable. Mara smiled. Celeste looked toward the nearest vines. "There's an offer, not Holloway's number. Enough? Will you take it?" "I think so." The answer should have felt like another division of Amos's property. Instead, Mara saw the quiet relief behind it. "Where will you go?" "I found a townhouse in Davis. Small kitchen, no vineyard smell. That sounds terrible. I'll endure it." Mara reached for the pie. Celeste held on for a second. "Are you going to say anything tonight?" "About what?" "Me. The offer. What we did." "What did you do?" Celeste's eyes narrowed. "This generosity is unattractive on you. I'm thanking people who worked. And the people who laughed. They know. That isn't always enough." Mara looked at the tables filling with neighbors, former employees, hospital staff, contractors, and growers. Grant was pouring water for Luis. Colin had found Nina's cash box and was trying to prevent her from placing a tip jar beside the wine. "I'm not putting the family on trial," Mara said. "Why not?" "Because Grandpa would want to testify." Celeste laughed despite herself. Mara took the pie. "Your seat is at the old table." "Where?" "Nearest the kitchen." "There is no kitchen. Elena's coolers. Same danger." Celeste looked at her for a long moment. "Thank you." At sunset, everyone sat. The string lights came on above them, crossing the rows in warm diagonals. Wind lifted the tablecloths, but the clips held. Grant quietly removed one napkin from beneath a clip to test Amos's old complaint. It blew into Colin's plate. "Scientific method," Grant said. Colin stuffed it into his shirt pocket. Food traveled hand to hand. Elena's roast chicken, Dana's macaroni salad, Nina's bread, Celeste's pie waiting at the end. The tables bent into conversation. People who had worked Bellwether before the fire told stories Mara had never heard. Raphael described Amos trying to operate a new leaf blower backward. Martin disputed every detail. Luis corrected Martin's corrections. Mara waited until the plates were mostly empty before standing. Her hands shook more than they had during the frost. Eli touched 2 fingers to her wrist. Mara looked at the bottles. "Before we open those," she said, "I need to tell you what's in them." Someone called, "Grapes." "That's encouraging." Laughter moved through the tables. Mara picked up the first bottle, but did not open it. The grapes came from roots the fire didn't kill. Some kept their original vines. Most carried new grafts. The crop was small enough that Luis called the fermentation tank a teapot. "It was a teapot," Luis said. "It had a valve. So does a good teapot." Mara waited for the laughter to settle. "When I inherited this land, I thought keeping it meant proving everyone wrong. That was useful for about a week." Celeste looked down. "Then the pump failed. The pipes leaked. I killed an entire row by refusing to choose where the water had a chance. I broke the first new chute with my own hands. Every time I decided survival was something I could accomplish alone, the Vineyard corrected me." She set the bottle on Amos's old table. "Luis taught me how to read the roots and graft what could carry something new. Eli brought the water back and wrote invoices mean enough to preserve my dignity. Grant repaired posts after dark when he wasn't ready to admit he cared. Colin knows more about machinery than any of us wanted to tell him. Nina, Raphael, Dana, Elena, Martin, and everyone here carried work that did not belong to them." She looked at Celeste. "My aunt kept the records, the stories, and a house full of a difficult man when the rest of us could leave. She brought coffee before we knew how to speak to each other." Celeste's eyes filled. Mara raised her glass, still empty. "Bellwether survived because many people carried it when one family couldn't. This wine belongs to that." For one suspended second, no one moved. Then Luis stood. "Open it," he said, "before the speech changes the acidity." Eli pulled the first cork. Bottles passed down the tables. The wine shone dark red in the glasses. Mara watched everyone smell it, which felt far more intimate than watching them drink. Dana tasted first. Her eyebrows rose. "It's actually wine." "You're no longer invited," Mara said. Nina took a sip. "Tastes like cherries and rain on a road." "Stone," Luis corrected. "It's my mouth." The restaurant owner called it smoky, then immediately clarified that she did not mean smoke damage. Someone said black tea. Someone else said cedar. Martin said it needed another year. Elena told him he needed another year. Celeste held her glass without tasting. Mara sat beside her. "What if I don't like it?" Celeste asked. "Then you'll have something in common with Grandpa." Celeste drank. She closed her eyes. "Well?" Mara asked. He would complain. "You said that before. I was right before." Celeste tasted again. "It's better than his last vintage." Luis heard her. Finally, an honest bell. Celeste stood with her glass. Conversation quieted. "I called this vineyard the sentimental piece," she said. Her voice remained controlled, but she held the table with her free hand. "I meant it kindly when I said it, and cruelly when I repeated it. Both times, I meant worthless." Mara did not rescue her from the silence. "I took the house because it looked whole," Celeste continued. "I thought wholeness and value were the same thing. Then I spent 3 years watching Mara work on something visibly broken while I tried to keep every crack in the house covered." She looked toward the blackened memorial row. "My father could make gratitude sound like criticism. I may have inherited that. So, I'll try plainly. She raised her glass to Mara. I was wrong about the land. I was wrong about you. I'm glad you stayed. The toast that followed was not loud. It did not need to be. Grant touched his glass to Mara's. Colin reached across the table and did the same. Celeste sat, breathing carefully through her nose. Your pie is burning, Elena told her. Celeste turned toward the warming oven near the coolers. Why didn't anyone say something? We were waiting for your speech to improve it. The tables dissolved into laughter. Later, after the pie survived and the final bottles emptied, Mara found Celeste beside Amos's marker. The vine there had been pruned for dormancy. Its first mature cane rested along the wire. You didn't leave a glass for him, Celeste said. He'd say it was wasted. He'd drink it anyway. Mara sat on the ground. Celeste hesitated, then lowered herself beside her, green dress gathering ash at the hem. I'm selling the house, she said. I know. I'm not abandoning it. I know. Celeste touched the carved letters of Amos's name. I spent years thinking he chose you because you understood him. He chose me because I came with the land after Mom died. Understanding took longer. He loved you most. Mara looked at her. He needed me differently. Celeste's face tightened. That isn't better, Mara said. It's just different. After a moment, Celeste leaned her shoulder against Mara's. They stayed until the string lights went out row by row. When the rooted cutting was strong enough, Mara planted it beside Amos's marker, far enough from the original root that neither would compete. Louise supervised. Eli dug. Grant brought the tractor even though no tractor was needed. Colin installed a small guard around the vine and charged the family $1. The vineyard remained modest. Mara reduced her hospital hours, but did not leave. Bellwether paid its taxes, its workers, and most years, Mara. Shared equipment agreements became routine. The trailer gave way to a small cottage only after its floor developed a slope nobody could describe as useful. Celeste moved to Davis and returned for harvest with pie. Grant and Colin sold the cabin after accepting an offer neither loved, which may have been the first truly joint decision they made. At the first full family harvest, the propagated vine beside Amos's marker produced a single cluster. Mara stood over it with her shears. Below the rise, Eli and the others called for her. Luis was complaining about the picking order. Celeste had clipped every napkin before setting the tables. Grant and Colin were arguing about music, but without conviction. Mara lowered the shears. She left the cluster on the vine. Then she walked down the hill toward the voices, while behind her the grapes remained in the light, untaken, unpriced, and entirely alive.